Hello, Earth. You know what day it is. It's Monday night day. And this is God's Comic Brad Stine, and this is Brad Stine Has Issues. What does it do at Brad Stine Has Issues? Comedy, conservatism, Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. My name is Brad Stine. My actual name is Bradley Stine, but we don't add the Lee because it confuses people. My son's name is Wyatt Stine. And he is the guy that does all the finger pointing and the buttons and whatnot. And we got an amazing guest today. I think tonight is what I meant to say. But you might be watching it during the day, so I don't want to throw you. Her name's Courtney Turner, and she was an aerialist. You know what those people are, the people that hang from blimps, I think. And in cords of blimp cords. Matter of fact, you might have seen some of the original Aerialist if you ever saw footage of the Hindenburg disaster. That's
Really, that's the joke you wanted to start this off with.
That was a joke.
The Hindenburg.
Well, do you remember where they had people hanging and falling off? It was terrible.
I'm just saying the Hindenburg thing wasn't dark. It was actually really bright. All the fire and stuff. You know?
It was flaming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Seriously, though, that's how you want to start this?
Let me ask you a question, though. When you make fun of the dead, why is that wrong? They don't care.
I think it's like disrespecting their legacy or something.
But they don't care. They don't even know what's happening.
No, but the survivors care.
Okay, but what is it we're disrespecting by the fact that they died?
We're not disrespecting the fact that they died. We're disrespecting them in a situation where they can't, fight back against it.
Oh, they can't defend themselves.
No.
Well, maybe it's their fault for dying.
Okay, but what if it isn't?
Well,
not every death is their fault.
How do you know?
You've seen crazy stories about people dying in unexpected ways.
Listen, every human being that has ever existed on Earth that has died from the same injury.
Stop living?
Their heart stopped.
Really?
Every single human died when their heart stopped. So everybody dies the same way is what I'm getting at. Whatever forces your heart to stop, you're in a guillotine, you are in you're parachuting and your parachute doesn't open.
Well, actually, that guillotine thing isn't true because they've apparently when you get your head cut off from a guillotine, your head still moves and stuff for 30 seconds afterwards. So it's really the brain stopping working that makes you die.
No.
Because at that point, their heart's not working because there's no brain attached to it.
Nope. Your brain can go completely blank and you are no longer cognitive, true enough, but you're still alive. As long as your heart's pumping, you are a living biological entity. Yeah. Doesn't mean you've got a good quality of life. Let's face it, Wyatt, if you were in a coma right now, nobody would notice because it's about as good as you do basically when you're away.
But no, I'm serious. If you get your head cut off by a guillotine, your heart stops immediately because it doesn't have a brain to tell it to pump. But the brain keeps your head alive, and the only reason why it stops is because you run out of oxygen for it. So the brain outlasts the heart for you to live.
Absolutely. Listen, I think that what some of the medical establishment in the West had concluded was you are dead when your brain dead. That's when they call them dead. But they're still alive. I mean, So that's my point. Is that it's an arbitrary call. It leads to some very potentially immoral. Unethical decisions. It's kind of like saying, well, a baby's not a baby until it takes its first breath. It's not human until then. So I can kill it. This jumping through hoops to be able to kill babies, which I didn't know people would ever do. That would be a fun, exercise. Can we come up with different options as to how to make this a non-baby? And it was funny because many years ago, I was working with a comedian. His name is Brian Copeland. I remember him. He was a black comic. I think he was from the Bay Area, so very left-leaning. And were discussing, because back in those days, did you know I was a professional stand-up comedian?
You wore?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I worked in comedy clubs. Were you aware of that?
There were clubs where you just tell jokes and make fun? That would never last today.
The original club was a bat, and they would tell a joke and then punch you over the head with or club you, and then
that's how they came up with the punchline.
That's right. So, anyways, I'm just trying to give you some backstory on how comedy works and just the history of it. It's nomenclature.
I'm learning so much.
Yes, Wyatt. Do you know that most of this podcast, what I'm thinking, I'm always one step ahead of you in the audience. You know that, and I'm sitting here thinking, how can I teach more to my son before I croak, before I die, which means my heart stops.
And if that's the case, then might I take a gander at the phrase "break a leg" coming from?
Break a leg is not from comedy. That is from the theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it was the original phrase referring to your leg or somebody else's?
It was so here's what it is. That's an old what do you call it? Superstition. If you were to say, "Hey, have a great show," and like, "Oh, you jinxed me," right? And you have a bad show. And why did you tell me you have a good show? Because if you really think about it, and you're a logical man, if you wish somebody well, that immediately means you want them to fail.
No, what? No, not at all. If I wish you well, it's because I want well to be wished upon you.
Well, then you tell me why the theater crowd were so just overwhelmed with the sense of pressure put on them when somebody simply wished them well. Hey, don't forget your lines. Hey, hope you don't miss your mark. Hey, hope a lantern doesn't fall on your head. Hey, hope the theater doesn't burn down while you're in the midst of a soliloquy. Those kind of things was too much for the theater or the thespian, as they like to be called. So they said, no, you need to wish us bad luck, and then good luck will happen. So it's literally like you are putting a mantra over them, like a magical spell. Break a leg, like bad thing happened, because then good things will happen. So yeah, it literally is a superstition, a magical witchcrafty superstition from people who are getting up in front of a bunch of people and pretending to be somebody else and wanting you to believe them. So these people have some issues, Wyatt.
So the people who love playing dress up and make believe also want you to throw maledictions their way because somehow that's good?
It is.
Okay, so does that mean if I say something neutral, like have a show, that would like do nothing?
I would say that would frighten them, because it's
really?
Like now the show's going to fail. The show's going to collapse.
The show's going to fail.
Show's never going to open.
Have a show, I'm correct.
Maybe.
What, is it going to get canceled now because I said that?
That's what they would think, just like if you said...
come on. You know what? What if I just tell you them, hey, I hope you never find love or happiness again? Is that going to magic it to existence?
I said it was a superstition. I did not say that it was a logical premise. I said it was a superstitious...
It just doesn't make any sense. Like...
They're actors, Wyatt.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay. So you need to understand a few things, though. I was with Brian and many, many, many years ago, and I think the guy ended up having like a radio show in the Bay Area, whatever. And so we got talking, but he's a left-leaner, right? And I'm a right-leaner. And so we got talking about abortion. He said, yeah, a woman should have her. Now, this has got to be in the 90s, Wyatt. So it was quite a while ago before, wokies took over the world. But I was trying to premise the idea of why abortion would be wrong, and I was trying to give him a kind of a sense of creating a platform by which he could analyze what seems to be hypocritical or inconsistent with his point of view. And so here's was the word play that I put into place. I said, picture this. A woman gets pregnant, and the husband and them wanted to get pregnant for so long, and he comes home, and there's candles lit. It's dark. Candles are lit. There's some glass of wine there, and a beautiful romantic music is playing in the backdrop, and steak is sizzling on the grill, and a great meal's coming, and she sits down, and he sits there, and just, what's going on, babe? What is it? And she goes, I just wanted to congratulate you, excuse me, but we're having a baby. And he's like, oh, are you serious? And he holds her, and they just, hug each other tight and kiss each other. We did it. Thank you, God, right? Scenario 1. Scenario 2. Same woman, same pregnant, same time frame, but she doesn't want the baby. Comes home. There's a TV dinner in the oven. She's kind of feeling, a little bit down. Doesn't, is not really excited about that. Actually, she went and got an abortion, and just life goes on. Never even tells them, and they just wait till the next time when they get pregnant when they want to. I said, what was different in those two scenarios? The exact same woman, the exact same man, the exact same moment. One was celebrated, one wasn't. Because in one, they wanted the baby. That magically made it a baby. Nobody says, hey, we're having a fetus. Babe, we're having a glob of cells. Honey, you're not going to believe this, but we have a preborn, non-human, but soon it'll be human. Nobody would ever say that. You say, we're having a baby. We're pregnant with a baby. It becomes a non-baby simply over one idea. I don't want it. Well, that is like magic. That's like saying break a leg. Nothing changed, but you think that by just pretending that you don't, because you don't want it, then you pretend that it no longer has agency. It's no longer human. So that's why it's such an evil, immoral idea to kill babies, because it's arbitrary, and it really is the only time that you're legally allowed to kill a human being is an abortion. So I don't know what it is about people and the way they speak, and they're crazy trying to manipulate words, but it's usually to make them feel better about themselves and not guilty. What is the most guilt you think you can ever remember feeling in your life?
Oh,
No, seriously, what did you do that made you feel so guilty that you can say in public?
That's a good question.
You know what? Now it's probably a bad question. You should have said, that's a question.
Well, yeah, but if I said that, then the opposite would be true. In that case, it wouldn't be a question. It would be a statement, I guess.
Oh, yes. Ooh. I'm just trying to live by the theatrical rules, and it makes it hard because you can't ever say anything good. But you always say that's a good question. I always thought to myself, kind of a redundant or a little bit not unnecessary to say that's a good question. Why do people say that? What question isn't good? What question isn't good? Matter of fact, is this question good?
No. You wanted me to be honest, okay?
Well,
I'm just saying.
Well,
you brought this upon yourself.
That's true. But anyways.
What you should have said is this a bad question?
Is it?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not, because you said it was bad, so it's not.
Right. So here's what Here's what I want to get at, okay? So I just was trying to make a point about how people perceive things, and they magically turn things into something they want it to fit so they can feel usually not guilty. Guilt is the key. Matter of fact, in your generation, I think what are you? Are you Gen X? You remember?
I genuinely don't know, nor do I care.
Okay.
I'm just here.
Okay. So, but you're in that vicinity.
I'm close to it, I think. I don't know.
Well, you were born in 1996. Anybody out there in Podland that knows if 1996 is Gen X or Z or General Custer? I just wanted to throw in another name.
Yeah, great one. Great joke. I can see the comments blowing up over that amazing one.
You never heard of him, of Custer?
I have, but it was just a generally bad joke. Like that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Like that. Same caliber, honestly, of joke.
Well, I salute you. I guess what I was trying to get at was this, son. We don't want to be shamed. That's where I was going at with your age group. They came up with this idea, no shaming. You can't fat shame. You know what fat shaming means, Wyatt?
Acknowledgement.
Yeah. But why are we not allowed to acknowledge?
Because it hurts their feelings.
Why?
Because it exposes an inconvenient truth.
How can you hide this inconvenient truth?
By redefining the terms so it's no longer bad.
So do you think that fat is a bad word, or it's interpreted that way because people think of fat people?
People want to interpret it like that because that means they have some authority to say, no, you can't say that because that's offensive. Even though it's literally what you call the stuff that makes you big. It's fat. That's what it's called.
The stuff that makes you big.
That's what it is.
I know. You're right. You're right. I can't argue with that, Wyatt. But while we're sitting here chewing the fat, I thought that I would add another layer to this. I came across this, Wyatt, as I was going through my my computer. And as you know, I'm a tech wizard.
I get it. Call back. Good job.
From where?
Break a leg. Or in your case, have a wonderful day.
That's right. So here's the deal. So I came across this, and it was something that I had printed out for my people out here watching right now. Can I call them my people? Is that seeming like...
Well, that's up for your people to decide.
Okay. Well, please comment below and like and share and subscribe and hit the notification button. Isn't that what we're supposed to say on a regular basis?
I honestly forgot the script.
I know it.
Quick, change the subject before they notice our weakness.
So anyway, now that you're all subscribed, I thought you should know that I had I don't know, I can't remember. I think this was a few years ago, but I pulled it out because I wanted to read it to you guys. And I probably wanted to put it on the teleprompter, but we have to set that back up because Wyatt
you never told me to set up the teleprompter, and this is in fact the first I'm hearing of it.
I know. And had I told you to set up the teleprompter, you would have said...
I would have. Look, even if I don't do it properly, some duct tape and wiring can go a long way.
Amen. Well, it's made our podcast get this far, my friend.
Nothing's caught on fire yet, and I intend to keep it that way.
Amen. Well, listen, we have firewall, by the way. Didn't you know that? We have fire.
Firewall? You mean like the thing that stops your internet from connecting?
Well, no, it's something that they made us, the city made us put in between the wall back here so that a fire break, it's like this foam stuff you have to put in.
Oh, interesting.
It's not. It was red tape nonsense, Wyatt.
Listen. Red tape is all fine and dandy if it prevents your house from turning red with fire.
Yeah, well, as you know, fire's not red, but anyway.
If fire's color is dependent on its temperature, good sir, red fire or cherry red is the coolest fire, but it's still hot. It's still fire.
Okay. What's the hottest fire?
So there's actually a color. It is a light shade of blue, and that is the theoretical color of infinitely hot fire.
What does that mean?
So technically, because the color of fire scales with its temperature, you can use math to determine the theoretical hottest color of fire available. So,
but the colors come from light waves, refraction, right? So how in the world would that connect to heat in different shades of colors? I don't get it.
Yeah. So according to a quick Google search, for infinitely high temperatures, a certain bluish color tone is approached. A green or purple hue is never reached. There is a limit. You can't have a purple flower, but you can have a red one. Oh. It stops at blue.
But they said that it would theoretically go to green next, but they just never can get that hot?
No, it's no amount of hot would ever be. It's physically impossible.
So where is yellow in the...
Yellow is a medium heat.
That's the sun!
Yes, the sun is a mediumly hot star.
What?
Red dwarfs are the red cold ones, and then blue giants or blue hypergiants, I believe, are the insanely bright ones that are like thousands and thousands of times bigger than the sun.
And hotter?
Oh, absolutely hotter. And they'll die quicker because they use their fuel faster.
Wow.
Yeah, they actually have the RGB color value of infinitely hot temperatures. Like they've calculated how you could recreate the color. It's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous, and I want it to stop.
I'm sorry. I can't help but shake the feeling that we were going somewhere with this, and then we kind of got lost.
We got sidetracked on. I didn't know there was all these flame colors.
There was an entire field of science devoted to colors and temperatures and stuff.
I didn't know that, and that
Absolutely.
tells me that those people desperately wasted their money.
No, they made a sound investment in research dollars. Remember, bake a leg.
Okay. Well,
Don't forget.
here's what I wanted you guys to know. I was trying to get to this, and every time I do, I get sidetracked, Wyatt. I don't know
It's
what
not
it is.
my fault. I know interesting things no one cares about.
You do. It's eclectic ephemera that you seem to have a lot of interest and access to. Then again, I'll hear a click Google search, and I have warned you, son, just say, off the top of my head, if I recall, and then fake it.
But people these days need evidence. They don't just listen to what you say.
Oh.
And so I have
Wait,
to
the media is not being straight up with
Oh,
folks?
no. Don't get me wrong. The media is your friend, and they would never do anything to mislead you.
Right, exactly. It's like, did we get that right? Did we say what you promised?
Do we need to do that again?
No more swatting, right?
Yeah, we're good, right? Yeah.
All right. Well, here's what I was going to get at. So a long time ago, I found this interaction I had with some, troll out into the internet. But I don't remember where I made the original comment, but I said, so it might have been Twitter, it might have been Facebook, I don't remember. Probably Facebook. But I put out a comment, and the comment was very simple. This is probably a couple years ago, so just see how prescient I actually was. I said, in the near future, all women's sports will be played by men. That's all I said. Wyatt, these people lose their dung if you just say something is obvious or frightening against the narrative. But I wanted to share with you guys a little bit of the interaction I had for a couple reasons. One, just so you can see how these people think. But B, so you guys can see how I respond and how I can do it at different levels. Sometimes I will, if I said, and this just happened to me on another Facebook page, when an atheist especially, because if you do anything with atheism, the atheist trolls come to pounce. These people are, because atheism lives on two legs, anger and arrogance. It gives it all its fuel. So and especially the trolls, always angry, always calling people names, always insulting you. These are very unhappy, unkind, uncivil, cowardly humans who get great pleasure in trying to hurt other people's values and belief system. So that tells you how broken and narcissistic they are. But the same thing happens with transgender. Now, I didn't even bring up transgender. All I said was, in the future, women's sports are all going to be played by men, which I will say this. They have now, I think women have played, men have played in women's tennis, women's soccer, women's volleyball. And I will say this, I think in some odd way, the one upside to men playing in women's sports is they finally found a way to make women's sports
interesting.
Yeah.
I was going that exact same way.
Yeah, because women's sports is boring. And that doesn't mean, so let me make this very clear. Any professional woman athlete in any sport is better than me and would destroy me. I am not saying they're not great athletes. I'm not saying they're not great at what they do. I'm not saying they're not better than me, stronger, faster in their particular discipline. Guaranteed. Because I'm just a schlup. I'm a comic. I'm an older gentleman. A gentleman nonetheless, but older. And so, yeah, they're great but they've always had men's and women's teams. Why? Because women compete against women, and that makes it equal and interesting. And I have a daughter, and so I used to watch her play a little bit. And of course, I want her to have a great life and enjoy everything. I'm all 100% for you. And I would say this too. If she would say to me, I want to be a Major League Baseball player at one time, I'd say, do it. Get out there and show that you can play against men at the highest levels and be an amazing trailblazer. Good for you. But you can't. Because at that level, you don't have a shot. You're a woman, they're men, and they will destroy you. We are faster, stronger, better at sports. So what? It doesn't make us better people. It just means that's something we clearly have a biological advantage. So, I especially like women's tennis. I don't watch tennis anyways, but I played in the 70s, and it was fun. It was all hot back in then, Jimmy Connors and McEnroe and whatever. And Bjorn Borg. And women's tennis is just slow. And it's funny because even Williams, Serena, or one of the Williams sisters, who's the best, when she was asked, where would you rank in the men? She's the number one. And John McEnroe said, she's the best female tennis player I've ever seen. Number one in the world. Well, how would she rank with men? He goes, she'd probably be around 750th, something like that. Or 2000. I mean, it was crazy. And they're like, how dare you? So she was on a TV show where they asked her, well, what do you think about this? She said, if I played the best male, I would lose 6-0, 6-0, probably not score a point. The game is completely different. She, the best tennis player in women's sports, said, if I had to play men, wouldn't have a game. I'd be destroyed. Because it's true. Anyways. I want to show you guys how these people think and how I kind of responded with them. See what you think about this, because I think you might find it interesting. So I just said, in the future, all women's sports will be played by men. And then here comes it. And it's a little long, so I might have to skip over some of their response. But anyways, he goes, well, I wonder if you know the weightlifting medal, the big transgender thing, was won by a woman, a real woman, not a transgender to be seen on the podium. Just wondering. I wonder if you knew that. And my response was, not for long. And then he goes, not for long isn't a very scientific or logical conclusion. You posit a theory substantiated with only opinion, and when it doesn't turn out the way you like it, you just go wait and see. Inductive argument? Where? Based on your belief that all men are stronger than all women, which by itself sounds very illogical and very much based on opinion. I never said all men are stronger than all women. I said in the future, men will be playing all women's sport. So I want you to see how these people just make crap up and how they don't see their own illogic, their own inability and their anger to have anybody disagree with their point of view. Your argument is solely based on sexist preconception rather than any hard data or science whatsoever. Really? It's not just some guy saying to well, there's a hormone therapy involved to get their testosterone to predetermined levels. So the opposite of steroids, meaning they're hampering their natural abilities, i.e. the male strength you seem to idolize so much. Suddenly I'm idolizing male strength. And I promise you, don't know this guy. If it is a guy, I'm stronger than him. That I can guarantee you, just by the way he speaks. Whereas a natural woman isn't reducing these levels, so she isn't being hampered. Oops, something came up on my thing. Hang on a second. Last but not least, you seem to imply that they're switched from male to female solely for the benefit of winning gold, when this did not happen and will not likely happen in the near future. My only issue with this is that it's starting an argument that demeans the sport and accomplishments of women regardless of what gender they were born. Not realizing that this man is destroying women's sports, destroying his own argument as he speaks, because he believes that if a man says he's a woman, he is. So I responded. You ready for because that was quite an attack. So how do you think I responded? I'll tell you. I simply said, soon all women's sports will be played by men. I just come back and give them this simple little thing, and then they go, ah, Brad, that's fallacious reasoning that men will undergo hormone therapy and surgery just to win a medal? Because why? Because they won't even ever be good enough to compete in men's sports? Appears the male eagle is more fragile than ever. That's exactly why Leah Thomas left his Penn swim team for men, where he was like ranked, I don't know, 100th, 500th, and started cranking on the women's and won everything. It's exactly why he did it. Couldn't compete with men. So then somebody wrote back and for me, so Tom, though succinct and possibly accurate, you lack any proof of this, which leads me to believe you're a troll or just don't have an educated option on anything and wait to hear something that gives you an emotional response that's validating your opinion. As I stated, I don't know where I sit in this issue. I'm not a woman. I don't compete, so it affects my life 0%, so about as much as your opinion of me, but keep trying. And then a woman jumps in. Her name is Marcy. I know lots of women who play on the male teams because they are that good. What male teams? The professional men teams? Oh, no. Oh, you mean the local softball league? You mean the bowling league? Is that what you mentioned? Is that what you're talking about? Because I'm sure they can. But I need you to mention it in a professional way and then show me, oh, the women are that good. They're not. The best woman in her individual sport cannot beat the men in the same sport ranked 100th. That's just true. So what? She goes, I know lots of women who play in the male teams because they're that good. We should stop them too, right? Are they biologically men? Biology is based on more than sexual parts. If hormone therapies are applied correctly, these men aren't producing the testosterone of a male. And since most female athletes don't get their periods, what is your basis for male or female inside-outside parts? Because looking for wee-wees and hoo-has is kind of elementary school thinking. Can hermaphrodites compete in both genders? Your process, I would say, yeah. By the way, they'd fail at both, but your process is screwed up. Is a woman who gets a hysterectomy no longer a woman? No. Why would she be? Hysterectomy has nothing to do with whether she has genitals that are still female and chromosomes that are still female. What are you talking about? How do you people not? Has science so eluded you that you can't even come up with what has been true for humanity for, 10,000 years? Woo! A man who has testicular cancer, need them removed. Less than a man? Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't have testicles. So that'd be less. But thank you. What about a vasectomy? What about it? All that means is that the semen and the whatever else it is goes in is being cut off from going in. A sperm is not interacting with the semen, so it can't go into the uterus. What? Who said that wouldn't be a man? It just means you can't procreate. How do these people think, Wyatt? Say something, Wyatt.
They don't.
Okay. Now, what state of change does your prejudice surface? Or do you actually think that women trained for the better part of her life is at a disadvantage to a male-born competitor than who recently underwent life-altering therapy? Exactly. Guaranteed they're better. They brought it by destroying every record. Seriously. I have the proof. Leah Thomas smashed all the records. Sorry. Male going into female bodybuilding, crushing the records. Why? Because they're men. Just because you're reducing what they created naturally, it's irrelevant. They've already established the foundation. They're men. Because there is some crazy thing. Historically, this argument was used in some form against allowing blacks or people of color in general into sports. And a form of it was used against giving women the vote. Can't trust women to do anything good if men are involved. They will just vote with their husbands because they don't have their own thought process. Women in the workplace would be the death of the American family. It was, by the way. And God help us if women can control their own bodies. They can't control their own bodies. What they can't control is their urge to have sex, get pregnant, and kill the baby. That they can't control. And that makes you evil. Want to keep playing? All I see here is a bunch of backseat drivers mongering fear and prejudice over what if that didn't happen. Also, Marcy Phelps, it was in weightlifting. No one looks like a woman in weightlifting. So, I finally responded, son. Since you seem interested in reason, I never mentioned medals. You interjected premises I never uttered. I said soon all women's sports will be played by men. That's all I said. And then he goes, fair point, I did, because competition at the international level, let alone national or state, is not done for any other reason than to win. If you're competing, you're trying to win. Your argument is that trans women will be playing all women's sports. Why is that an issue? What is your fear or concern here? I would suppose it's that they will dominate and take over said sports. Yeah, pretty good supposing. People will lose interest in the sports being played, probably, and maybe not want to watch these people, guaranteed, compete. Perhaps some may lose their spot to this type of competitor. Already happening. Sounds a lot like arguments for continued segregation in baseball in the 1940s. And then, I said, nope, just unfair to women. Based off what data? If Laurel had won or been placed, I might say there's a discussion to be had. As it stands, she was disqualified, which appears to be the result you wanted, if not the reason. And then I said, because men are superior to women in strength and body structure, bone density, and testosterone, thus it's unfair for women to compete against men. Otherwise, they would never have been men's division and women's divisions in sports. It's not complicated. Brad Stine, strength, body structure, bone density, and muscle mass, the loss of which are effects of low T, 300 nanograms. Women typically have less than 100 nanograms. The IOC allows that woman in training to have more testosterone, up to 288 nanograms. The average male has about 680 nanograms and can be as high as 1,070 nanograms. And that's still just the average guy. I'm not even talking about elite athletes who the IOC, IAFF cap at 850. So a trans woman undergoing hormone therapy would have testosterone less than 300, plus the IOC mandates it must be even lower. Further, that the competitor must have endured this therapy for more than 12 months. Anytime you want to chime in with more than your feelings, please feel free. Okay, I will. The fact that a man has to resort to chemical alterations to try to reach the typical female baseline is simply because he's a man. The proof, then, that his male body is defined as such. The fact that his biological foundation through his life was male gives him an advantage over females, or he could simply wish his testosterone away. You will never win this argument because you're literally arguing against science, biological immutability that can only be altered by resorting to female design traits, and most importantly, logic, reason, and the totality of human understanding of male-female natural delineated traits. You are literally on the wrong side of history by about 300,000 years. Attacking, maligning, insulting, and slandering dissenting viewpoints doesn't help your case, by the way. Not sure what your aim is. Absurdity will never equate to truth. And then somebody wrote, "You are awesome, Brad Stine. Love your perspective." I didn't have to include that white, but I wanted to. Then the guy,
you absolutely have.
I did. The guy jumped back in. Where did I malign and insult you? Also, historical morals do not equal science. I'm partaking in a discussion, which means I attack your argument, not you. My disagreement with you isn't an insult. You say you're on the side of science and truth, yet back your argument with no science. You don't like what is happening, don't understand, it probably goes against some core belief you have. Where's the science you hold in such high regard? Your entire scientific principle on is a man and a woman is a woman. Last time I checked, one of these things is not like the other, is the most elementary of scientific principles. I'm actually using science and research in my arguments. You have relied on the same trope over and over again, men big, women small, which is a generalization you're guessing at any outcome without allowing for any experimentation. Very unscientific. I said, laugh out loud. And I don't normally do that. You think I'm here to win an argument? Okay, let me make sure I don't know if this was me or not, actually. Let me see what it says. You think I'm here to win an argument? No, I could tell early on that there was no winning against your narcissistic fever dream. That doesn't sound like it must have been, I wouldn't say that. Male and female genes are biological, and biology is a science. But gender itself is not a science. Gravity is a scientific principle, and yet we can alter it. The theory of relativity tells us that time is relative to our surroundings and experiences. Maybe gender is relative as well. But hey, if you all want to hear is the kudos of like-minded people from within your own echo chamber, I guess it's your life. Wrong side of history? Sure, maybe. I like your confidence, but also opinion and not scientifically grounded. Then I said, yes, you can alter gravity. Alter means to deviate from its design. Thus, the idea that men and women are unique in strength, biological makeup, and brain function is axiomatic. Any deviation from that design is proof of the immutable traits being altered. I think I'm using science. Once again, your argument defeats itself. By the way, I didn't go to Google. I just made this up. Once again, your argument defeats itself. That will never change, even if laws do. Men at the elite levels of sports will always dominate women, period. To say there are no gender traits is self-refuting as well, since those traits are what men who identify as women seek to acquire. I'm not sure why you mentioned me chiming in, but that was insulting and arrogant. That's all. Every one of your responses I've engaged was in direct response to your premises. Most informative is this started with a simple statement that remains true. Soon, all women's sports will be played by men. You took umbrage with that as though I feared change, and then conflated that with blacks denied participation in baseball. There are no races, and as such, men of higher melanin count being denied access to a game played by men with a lesser count is unfair, because the prejudice is predicated on appearance as opposed to biological essence. Because this is complete opposite of men and women in regards to physical realities, the sexes have always been separated. Otherwise, women would never have been able to play virtually any sport professionally if they had to compete with men. I realize you see it as a civil rights issue, which completely ignores the fact that a man claiming to be a woman will eliminate biological women's access to civil rights in the sports arena. There's no science that backs your claims unless it's coming from a postmodern science is racist and Western in its perspective. If you ascribe to critical theory, then we are not having a conversation, because you don't believe in truth, and logic and reason is available to the human race but is socially constructed. If that is your foundation, then you're taking the world backwards. Either way, your arguments have failed every time. Not because you aren't smart, but because you have chosen a flawed presuppositional worldview. Brad, again, all women's sports will be played by men is not a provable statement. Figure skating necessitates a smaller partner for lifting and throwing at all. Yet your premise is that big men will toss around big men. Your opinion-based truth is just a theory and not a provable, testable theory. It's literally wait and see. Olympic caliber athletes make up about 5% of the population. Trans people make up another 5%. Do the math. We're talking about statistically insignificant numbers. So your opinion will remain an opinion for a long time before it can be proven. If no new trans athletes come out next Olympics, you're safe to say wait and see. And if they do get to say, I told you so, you have yet to say anything beyond biology. That's right, because that's all that matters. You haven't cited that long-term effects of hormone therapy are unknown. Oh, they're known. They're destructive. Or that hormone therapy in sports is also just at the speculative stage. Nope, we know it destroys everything and makes you sterile and can cause cancer. All things that are easily found with just a little research. But you didn't bother, did you? You have an opinion, and that's enough for you, so you own it. Stop pulling science into this when you know nothing of it. I've given you time and an opportunity to lay down some proof or argue with science, but you haven't bothered. You haven't even bothered to counter what stats I've given or even asked for a citation, because you don't care, do you? You've made up your mind, and that's fine. Free country and all. Seems to me your reading of my words caused you to infer an insult. You must be one of those biologically sensitive males. That's a joke, but take offense if you wish. No, it's an insult. I could have pointed out you use of the term male superiority, but as an adult, I inferred it was the term of sport and not a general feeling that women fear. Did you? Wow, you're a genius for figuring that out. Science can't be racist. It's a tool. How it's used, how it's been used by people can be. Oh, is that right? Science has been called racist. Western science has been called racist by critical race theory. So read a book outside of your echo chamber. You failed to argue a point like a flat earther who wants others to prove him wrong. I'm not here to prove you wrong. Like you, I don't have the answer, but at least I have the facts, scientific ones at that. You haven't listened to anything beyond immutable opinion that this will end women's sports. You just keep speaking in circles. I've proven everything I needed to prove, and you have nowhere to go with this. You're just screaming and crying and probably pooping your pants. But I can't prove that. Not scientifically, at least. Flawed? My willingness to look at both sides, argue both sides, and leave my emotions and beliefs at the door. Give me a worldview that is much more informed than one that relies on the same counterpoint ad nausea. Science isn't a perfect science because it's done by humans. Science changes and alters its stance and facts all the time. Old theories are just proven and new ones put forth. Science isn't static, and neither is our perception of truth. Because it was held true that blacks were lesser humans. It was held to be true that the sun revolves around the earth. I'm not arguing with you because I disagree with your stance. I disagree with your argument. It's fear-mongering at its basis level. You argue the trans problem, much the same way an anti-Semite argues the Jewish problem, instilling panic over the perceived loss of institutions. The perceived loss of institutions. I'm not saying you're an anti-Semite or racist or sexist or even transphobic. And the last thing was... was almost. Another guy responded to me, frickin' brilliant. I always like to give my little pats on the back. And then I responded, I'm sorry this is so long, guys, but I felt it needed to be heard. My demeanor, this is me, back to this guy who I've never used science for yet. My demeanor couldn't have been less panic. You're right, in fact, that there may be some sports, women's sports, that men aren't interested in. So it could be argued that my statement, all women's sports will be played by men, is an overreach. I'll give you that. Because you utilize data in support of the necessary steps needed to try and lower a man's inherent physical advantage, you did in fact prove my point that it is a man to begin with. Fear-mongering, unfortunately, was used by you to other my position as it makes you uncomfortable. And yes, I use science, reason, logic, common sense, and an inductive argument to make my point. In conclusion, I leave where I started with a caveat. In the future, any sport a man is interested in that women play will be played only by men. You keep mentioning inductive reason like it's a good thing. All your experiences, i.e. data, can be true and still not prove your conclusion true. I find it funny that you admit that there are sports men won't want to participate in, but castration, i.e. gender reassignment, and hormone therapy aren't part of them. Your premise that men are stronger and faster than women in general is factual, statistically anyways. That's kind of science, right? That you said I didn't use? What is also statistically factual is the number of male golfers who refuse to use the amateur tee box, formerly the women's tee, based on their handicap, which is what the boxers are for. Yet you propose men will willingly assign themselves a female gender to beat, as you call them, real women. You say men will take over women's sport. You know what? I'm not going to go through all this crazy crap. It's long. He's just going back through his percentages and how it's never going to happen. Anyways, I did finish by saying, yes, I stated my use of inductive argument because my premise has not been validated yet. So anyways, White, that was a long, right? A long exploration into how people go nutso over their beliefs and how they will argue and throw out data. And then when you respond with data and insight, it was, well, you didn't use anything. So I don't know, White. It was long. I hope it was interesting. I wanted to show how I could be funny and truthful and maybe have a little insight. So what's your summation of that little fencing match I had with that up until now unknown troll?
Like a fencing match against a brick wall. You can poke and prod at it all you want, but at the end of the day, it ain't budging.
That's right. So did you think that I made any good points, son?
Kind of the same good points ad nauseum.
Because he was nauseating me up.
I ain't saying there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Scientifically, it was ad nauseum-esque, though.
Why, do you know who our guest is tonight?
I know her last name, but I've forgotten her first.
Turner.
Turner?
What's her first name?
That's Courtney?
Find it. Yes, there you go.
I guessed. That was a guess.
Why, do you remember when she was here?
Vaguely.
Do you know what she does, had done for a living?
Hindenburg.
No, she was an aerialist.
Yeah, that's what I said, right? According to you? According to you, that's what I said?
But here's the thing. She is interesting. Now, keep in mind, folks, so those of you who are watching Brad Stine Has Issues for the first time, like, subscribe, go join the Mighty 10,000. Go to bradstine.com, join the Mighty 10,000. We need you to help this ministry grow. But I will bring on people. My show is more eclectic. I said it's comedy, conservatism, and Christianity colliding with a cacophony of clarity. So people that I bring on, what I care about is that they are interesting or they have truth, because all truth is God's truth. So when I had James Lindsay on, who is an expert on CRT, he's an atheist, but everything he said was factually robust, and I wanted to bring it to you to teach you and to help you grow. When I brought on the sideshow performer, the Torture King, I thought you might be interested in a world that you have never seen behind the curtain. I thought perhaps when I brought on a PhD, that might, find fascinating. Or singers or actors. I want you to be intrigued. I want you to be growing. I want you to become a believer in God, reveal himself in Christ, because, folks, I'm sorry, there has never been anything like it in human history. There has never been another man like Jesus of all time. Yes, it takes faith. Yes, you have to move into the transcendent to see him, but he did the impossible. He did the impossible. He came back from the dead, and people saw it, and they talked about it. And he also was predicted in prophecy. Folks, this is the key. If we're going to see our country have a shot, we need to return to the Judeo-Christian ethic that this country was founded on. It just is the truth. God is not going to allow us to butcher babies and mutilate children and say we're doing the good things and not punish us. It is necessary for a holy God. But listen, I bring on everybody. I got atheists on. I got everybody on. If they're interested, they have some insight, if they have wisdom, and if they and if they have something that can help you grow, that's what we're going to do. Well, Courtney Turner, as you're about to find out, is Jewish. Now I've had what do you call it, Messianic Jews on, so people who accepted Christ as Messiah. And of course, there's Jews who do not. She is not, as of this time, a Messianic Jew, but she had interesting things happen to her in her life that caused her to change the way she saw the world and how she was going to engage it during Corona. So again, another amazing story with an amazing person and has their own podcast that truly talks about these values. Here's the thing. We need allies on our side. I need conservatives who see things through a conservative lens. I need Christians, certainly, that see things through a Christian lens. But if you're not a Christian, if you see things from a conservative perspective, that correlates, that fits well with Christianity, so we can work together. If you're an atheist, so you don't believe there's God, but you still believe that we need to be patriots and need to be able to defend our nation, right? Like all nations have throughout human history. It's in the Bible that Israel defended itself. Then we can work together. What we want is peace, and we don't want to be overrun and destroyed by Marxist evil. And Marxism got its power from atheism. Let's be honest. Atheism gives you a right to do whatever you want, and there's no rules, no morals. You make up your morals as you go because there's no God. There's no ultimate maker of the rules. So, nevertheless, we are fighting a very powerful fight. And as we record this on, I think it's October the 16th, 15th, maybe? 14th. In a few weeks, we'll have a new elected president, Kamala Harris, or Donald Trump. And of course, this will be shared and archived. So, a year from now, we'll be listening. You all know who already won. We'll see where the things are going. But we need to fight the good fight and never give up. And so that's why I wanted to bring this person on. You guys remember John Guandolo, the former FBI agent that I had on a few times. He recommended her to me, to Courtney to me. And he said, you're really going to like her. She's one of us. And I think it will really be something your people are going to find interesting. So I said, I'll take you at your word. And I did. And so here we sit on this Monday night after that long, unique fencing match I had with this unknown person. And with our little delving into why is it not okay to make fun of the dead and aerialism at the nose end of a burning blimp. We come full circle, Wyatt, to where we're going to bring on our guest. And I think that people are going to be mesmerized. Don't you think so, Wyatt?
Oh, not at all. Nope, not in the slightest. This is not going to do that. Nope.
Well done, son.
Have to keep that joke running just a little bit longer.
Well, or as I like to say, break a larynx.
Please don't say that again. I know you like to say it. Stop liking it.
It's just the comedy version of break a leg. Hey, all of my folks, all of my peeps of Brad Stine Has Issues. Hi, Karen. Hi, Nick. Hi, Paul Fay Marie Rachi. Hey, Bushquacker. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Stan. Hey, Danny. You guys better be on, or I'm going to look like an idiot. Join us and welcome Courtney Turner. Enjoy this interesting ride with my new friend and somebody you need to understand about because she is a fellow Militia of the Mind member, Courtney Turner. Courtney, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro.
Well, that's all I had. It's all I could come up with at the time. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on my show, as I said. And what I really like is that John Guandolo introduced us, because John is obviously a bit of a Renaissance man and certainly has put himself in harm's way to say hard things. Yeah. And so I love that. I love courage. You know, Courtney, kind of like what I was saying to you before about the Emperor's New Clothes. You know, everybody loves stories. about heroes. And they love stories about the warrior who overcomes the odds, and they love David and Goliath. Everybody loves those stories. But you know what I noticed most people don't want is a turn.
Mm.
They don't want it to be their turn. They want to read about it,
Right.
but they don't want to do it. And because there's so much at stake. And that's where you found yourself in just a few years ago. A regular old person who was just trying to mind their own business.
Mhm.
You found out that it don't work like that no more.
No, what I would say is I kind of started speaking out because I knew that auto-critique didn't work out so well in the struggle sessions during the Maoist regime, and I didn't want to be part of the problem. So
Yes.
I felt that it was time for me to step up and speak out.
But you know what? One of the biggest compliments I get are people saying, well, thank you for saying the things you say and for standing up for these values. And thank you for, I agree with everything you say. And I always see that as kind of a left-handed compliment because that's like, what you're basically telling me is thank you for getting your hands dirty because I ain't going to do it. So thanks for getting out there and doing that for us. And it's like, this ain't going to work until you pull your weight, until your sphere of influence is influenced by you doing this. We're trying to inspire with the hope that they do likewise in their little neighborhood, because the only shot we have at keeping this nation free is going to be a peasant's revolt. It's going to have to happen in small little villages and towns. And it's the only way, because we've been completely abandoned by DC. It's completely corrupt. There's nothing left of what we used to think was checks and balances. So we're going to get into all that. But before we do, I want to show people just how interesting you actually are. And also, I think, Courtney, to show how people come to these awarenesses and these revelations who often from the most unlikely sources.
Sure.
People that you wouldn't think would be joining this fight and be intellectually have the acumen to handle it. So you started out, or I don't know about started out, and I'll certainly allow you to give me your bio, but what I found interesting was, for another reason you'll know in a moment, that you were an aerialist. So we're actually going to start with that, A, because it's not most people you meet are aerialists. So that's interesting. But B, we're going to talk about what that means and the way it developed you. What kind of a person would even choose that kind of performance art, and how it brings us to today. So talk to me about how you got into that particular art form, and I don't know, what does it mean to be an aerialist?
Well, aerial acrobatic performer. So the way I explain to most people is kind of like Cirque du Soleil.
Yep.
I was not a Cirque, officially a Cirque performer, although I have lots of friends who were.
You could have been.
I don't know. I mean, I got into it pretty late, but I do train with people who were. So that was exciting. That was really fun. I got into it because I tried out for American Ninja Warrior, and I have very small hands.
Okay.
So I knew that to compensate for lack of surface area, I had to really build grip strength. You need a lot of grip strength anyway for a Ninja Warrior.
Yes.
You can't use any aids, so you can't use chalk or any kind of
Right.
grip, right? So
That's
you
right.
really have to have the grip strength. That's most of what it is. But so I knew that I needed to do something to help develop that, and it wasn't going to be just, regular strength training. And I was an actress in New York City, and I had actually put my manager in business.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he had found me at it was an event where they had called me in for a casting. I ended up turning down the casting. I very early on kind of realized what the industry is about, and they had told me I was the perfect person for this role. They flatter you, puff you up, and they said I met, like, it was very unique what they were looking for. I had been a gymnast, so that makes sense with the aerial, and so they wanted someone who could play, who met like the typecasting, but who could also do like a series of tumbling passes. But I found out that what they wanted was me to do those tumbling passes topless.
Well, you saw that coming.
Yeah.
It's always with the women. So you were perfect. Can you take your shirt off? I wanted to see. You got to be kidding me. Okay.
And I was like, I think you have the wrong girl.
Yeah.
So, but they had invited me to this, what they called a networking event, and I had met who then became my manager. And he became, we were really close. Like, he called me his little sister. But we became good friends, and he wanted to introduce me to some people, and he kept like telling people that I was his model. And I was like, I missed that boat by about a foot.
Yeah.
So, like that
Me
just
too.
sounds silly.
Me too. I'm
right?
not on GQ. Have not ever been asked at 5'6". They just
It's
kind of
not-
say,
yeah.
"Can you like move the chair for the guy, well, maybe, or do a
Yeah,
grip?"
maybe an apple cart. Yeah. So I was like, this just sounds silly. And I said, and I'm not pursuing modeling, I'm pursuing acting. So I had told him, I said, if you want, we could work. What I realized pretty early on in the industry was that I tended to negotiate for myself. And I was very blonde at the time and, small, young, and they kind of saw me as blonde cheerleader. And a lot of these, male executives, older male executives were very confused when like little blonde cheerleader girl was trying to negotiate with them. And I actually didn't even fault them for it,
Okay.
but they would get viscerally like upset, agitated. And I realized it was not really.
And who was
moving
doing
me.
this? Harvey Weinstein, by any chance?
I actually did meet Harvey.
Of
Harvey actually
course.
did proposition me.
Of course. He propositioned everybody.
Yes. I did not join the Me Too movement because I turned him down. I knew what he
Yeah.
was asking, and I knew that I probably wasn't going to get, the good end of the deal. So, yeah.
No pun intended, but anyway.
Right. So, I think that whole thing is just silly and a lot of, people trying to get attention out of a movement. But that aside, I didn't fault them. It was I understood that they kind of had this perception, and this is how most people who that fit that stereotype behaved, and they were just very confused by it. So I realized pretty early on that it would behoove me to have a man represent me. Like I didn't have a talent agent at the time, and it was actually pretty difficult at that time to get a talent agent without a really extensive body of acclaimed quote unquote work. So, and I wasn't in the union at the time. It was really early in my career. And so I told him, I said, hey, if you want to be my manager, I can kind of show you the ropes and teach you, and I will like tell you what to say. And I think it would be better to have a little bit of a buffer between me and, those I'm trying to negotiate with. And so I kind of showed him the ropes. I remember buying like stacks of books and writing out like scripts for him to every time I was up for something to negotiate the deal. But we became very close, good friends. But yeah, anyhow, back then we would go around to a bunch of these different events in New York, and I remember at one time there was a girl up in the air, like hanging from silk fabric, and I, having been a gymnast growing up, I was I think I could do that, you know?
Yeah.
And
Plus, you were interested, I guess.
yeah. And I asked how much she was making, and my manager, he said, my quote unquote big brother, he was like, I booked her. And I said, really? How much is she making? And it was something like $250 for a 3-minute show.
Yeah.
I was like, that's crazy. I was like, sign me up.
I'm in. Give me some fabric.
Yeah. And so I think I took like one class to try and learn. And my mom did not like the idea of it. She thought it was, very inappropriate. And I stopped immediately. And then when I had tried out for American Ninja Warrior, I remembered it. And I thought that would be a great way to build grip strength, and it would be so much fun. So I started training, taking classes, and I just fell in love with it. I actually fell in love with it way more than Ninja Warrior stuff.
Interesting.
Although that was a great experience. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. And I feel like it's a very unique performance art because it is physically demanding, but it's similar to gymnastics in that it really is a performance art. It's a whole, choreographed piece. It's very expressive. I think of it as kind of like puzzle making, but physically. It's very much a lot of it's physics. So.
Well, and part of what makes that such a difficult art form, or in gymnastics where it's a sport, part of what I think makes it uniquely specific is that you're also, in the incredible difficulty of it, you're supposed to make it look effortless.
Of course.
It's supposed to seem very smooth and simple and easy, and that's how you know you did it right.
Yeah.
But of course, it's incredibly difficult to do. And I will say this because, it's always important to be misogynistic when you have a woman on. Most female sports, to me, is unwatchable for a man because it just bores me. And it's not because they're not good athletes.
Sure.
Any professional woman or athlete will be better at that sport than I am, no
Sure.
question. But compared to the men in the basketball, in the football, in the baseball, in the softball, in the soccer, in the thing, you can't compete. Obviously, that's not a that's like saying a 5-year-old can't compete with a. It's just the difference in your strength and your quickness and your.
They're
fast
very
wit-
different.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen, actually, it's very interesting. Like the male's gymnastics and
Yeah.
women's gymnastics
Yes.
are completely
Very
different
different.
sports.
Well, what I wanted to say, and I don't
Yeah.
want to leave this hanging there, was the only sport that I feel like women can hold their own in comparison with men is gymnastics, because that is incredibly difficult what they're doing. It's as equally as difficult as men, because suddenly you don't have to do pull-ups. You have to be able to do 3 flips and a round off, or I
Yeah.
don't know all the nomenclature, but you have to be able to do all these very difficult moves that take strength and speed and accuracy and so forth and so on. So you can watch that and go, okay, that's really hard and at the same level. It isn't as what the men are doing. That is very much a strength-oriented
exactly.
element of it that women wouldn't be able to do. But who
Totally.
cares?
Yeah.
The women's version actually is more interesting, I think, sometimes to watch. It's more fluid, more artistic. So in that regard, I think that's where women are very equal in the interest in watching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally
Okay.
makes sense.
Does it sound like I insulted you somehow?
No,
or
not
women
at all.
in general?
No, I mean, women are not as strong as men. That's just a fact. Of course, there's always outliers, exceptions to every rule. There are men who are weaker
Yeah,
and women
of
who are
course.
stronger. That always happens. But for the most part, there's this one meme. I love it. It's like this middle-aged woman lifting weights, and she's like, after decades of lifting, I'm finally possibly able to compete with a 15-year-old boy who's never worked out a day in his life.
Isn't
I
that
might
so
be as strong as him now.
true? Well, listen, when the American soccer women's champion, world champion, American, played or scrimmaged with 15-year-old high school boys, they lost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and again, we're not doing an episode on
Yeah,
man,
no.
but it does have some relevance to what we're going to talk about soon, because it talks about the idea of truth and reality and how that can be obfuscated because it makes people feel better about an agenda.
Right.
And when you're, and what I always say about conservatives, are you conservative? Would you call yourself a conservative?
Yeah, I
Okay.
would.
You
Yeah.
don't have to. I'm just,
Yeah.
but I would know.
I think it's closest. I tend to say that these, political quote unquote labels in practical application become more like marketing for target audiences than they
Okay.
actually are really rooted in philosophical and ideological presuppositions. That's not to say that they'd never had those roots. But I think
Okay.
in modern practical application, they've become target labels for target.
So are you saying
audiences.
then, just to make sure I'm not reading
Mhm.
into this, so are you saying that sometimes people that represent, let's say, the conservative platform or the leftist platform, sometimes are just leveraging that to make money, so to speak, as opposed to ideologically commitment, whether they ever make money or not? I'm talking about Daily Wires or Charlie Kirk's or guys that
Right.
have made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they are very good
Conservative
at
Inc.
Yes, but okay, but there's money to be made
Yes,
there. Do you think they're manipulating that, or do you think they're legit and that they just happen to figure out a way to monetize?
Well, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think that there's big money to be made, but I think that a lot of people who are in it have fairly genuine intentions. They may really think of themselves as a conservative or as a leftist or a socialist. But a good example is if you ask a socialist what a socialist, like somebody who identifies as a socialist, what that means, most of them can't really tell you. But they know that they're social justice warriors.
Right.
And so they're fighting for that. And that makes them feel good. It becomes identity.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that some of the, and I would almost put this conservative Inc. umbrella in as middle management. I don't know that they're as aware of the bigger operation that's at play. But I think that people who are pulling the strings do know, and they know that they can lure them using ideology. There's a really great document. You can pull it off CIA.gov. It's called From Mice to Rascals. And they talk about how they recruit agents. And what they don't say is, I think they're referencing change agents, actually. But they say agents, so like assets agents for the CIA. They said it came out of the OSS. the other part that they don't say, but this is my speculation, is that it actually comes out of the War Office selection boards. And this was a project done during World War II by Tavistock psychologists, where they were creating these types of tests. They called them intelligence tests. I put it in air quotes because even of their own admissions, it really wasn't about intelligence in the sense of aptitude, the way you would think of an IQ test. It was much more about malleability and adaptability, mental adaptability. And this is, of course, they're looking for certain key elements and criteria.
So how are they advertising to find these people? Just like on the newspaper, like, hey, want ads, I'm looking for CIA operatives. So there must be some subtle way that they're trying.
They infiltrate, and then they do little tests, and then they're so. But the reason I brought it up is because MICE is an acronym, and it stands for money, ideology, coercion, compliance, and ego. And they had started with that acronym as a way of recruiting these assets and agents. And then they moved into, they decided rascals was a better term. Rascals stands for reciprocity, authority, scarcity, coercion, compliance, and liking. And then the last one is social proofing. It's very similar. But all this to say, now you're getting kind of a bigger picture of how it's not just people, various people who might be specific agents or assets in an intelligence apparatus. They do this also for psychological operations, for media. And so now you can see how some of these media outlets might be enticed by things like money, ideology, they could be coerced, their egos are being stroked. So that's why I say it's kind of more middle management. I don't know if they're always aware, but they might be being lured. And, they have the label, they identify as conservative, but I'm saying that what happens is they put these different labels and now you become target audiences. So I'll give you a very specific example, something like school choice, right? A lot of conservatives think that's a conservative platform and they wear the label, I'm a conservative. And so these are the things that here's like, check the boxes. Yeah. These are the things I'm supposed to support. And they don't realize it's a Hegelian dialectic that's at play and intentionally designed. They're using words like choice, which appeal to a lot of conservatives and freedom-minded people and people who might be on the quote-unquote right wing, but they're being targeted with this platform when it really is not very conservative at all. It's the opposite of
Are you talking about school choice in general, specifically, but not in all areas? Because obviously the conservatives would say they're pro-life as a pro-choice for when it comes to abortion. So in that regard, they would think that would be a very moral stand to say, I'm not going to allow people to kill their babies, and that's not pro-choice. So what I'm getting at is, so you're saying that when it comes to, for example, school choice, you're postulating that is a manipulative leverage term to give people the illusion that they're choosing the proper foundational philosophy that it aligns with their belief system,
policy,
agency to the parents, proper education for the kids that's more effective and it doesn't have propaganda attached to it. I mean, that's what they're assuming.
That's what they're assuming.
So,
but really, it's government school choice, and anything the government funds, it runs, right?
Okay.
So it has.
So the private institutions.
A private institution, by definition, if it's private, does not take any government funding.
Okay. So you're talking about school choice that's applying to anybody that's actually federally funded.
It doesn't have to be federal. If there's any government funding, that can be state, that can be local. But once there are government funds attached, there are strings attached. And that is the goal of school choice. I didn't mean to go on. I was just trying to bring
No, but it's important because you're helping us to see what's most important about this interview right now is not only get to know you and let people know what you're about, but also that there's some proactive way to fight back as American citizens, as people who believe in liberty and freedom. If we don't have actual tools to actually not only expose, which most people do, most of the conservatives or liberals sit there and their entire game is, can you imagine what would happen if a conservative had said that? And everybody goes, oh, he's so insightful. I don't give a crap. Fix it. Do something. Everybody knows the game is rigged. That's all. That train's long past. What do we do now as unique citizens who have been abandoned by the DC that supposedly was going to check and balance when things became totalitarian or despotic or in any ways control-driven oligarchs? I mean, this is what we've discovered. this is what we've discovered, and I guess it would be interesting to find out where your kind of revelation or enlightenment hit.
Mhm.
But I mean, I've been doing comedy for 30 something years,
Mhm.
and I really kind of came out of the closet as a Christian and conservative, I don't know, 20 something years ago or whatever, where I made that the through line to my commentary within the context of my comedy. So if you see a Dave Chappelle, if you saw a Richard Pryor, George Carlin, these are guys that are comics, but in very special um, uh, area of comedy where they have a bigger picture they want to talk about. It does have an agenda. It does have a teleology to it that they're trying to reach, as opposed to a guy that's just funny.
Right.
Like a Jim Gaffigan or a Brian Regan or Jerry Seinfeld. They don't want to be political. We just want to be, and that's, God bless, that's a wonderful thing where everybody can be laughing. But for those of us who feel like there's something more at stake, we try to inculcate our belief system within the format of comedy, because that becomes the delivery system. That becomes our So, but I guess the point I was going to make was, once you sort of decide, I have a particular worldview presupposition that will be part of this experience, it usually is designed to draw people of the similar ilk to have a place to go and find what they want to see. Nothing wrong with that. It's capitalism. It's just, it's supply and demand. There was nobody supplying that to these guys. And I came from middle America. I came from Indiana originally. I lived most of my life in California, but it's a very blue collar, conservative, puritanical work ethic, agency, meritocracy. It was all part of the way they didn't have any of those terms. That was just common sense.
Just the values
back in the day. But clearly sense isn't common anymore.
No.
Well, it has words. Words have meaning. And I'm very specific about that, because as a comic, it's my entire livelihood is the use of words, the misuse of words, and the censorship of words all have a deep existential result to me. Of course. Because that's my entire commodity.
I think to everybody, but I understand.
Yeah, but I mean, but when that's your entire wheelhouse, is words only. I don't have to walk. I can be sitting in a chair in the dark and talk and do my job. Not everybody can. See what I'm saying?
No,
so it has a very, so the words have a very lot of weight to me. Okay, so anyways, I didn't mean to get off in the weeds on that, but I guess what I wanted to see was, let's go back to that school choice, just because that does matter and does show up a lot in the ethos of us trying to figure out what is most important, because the schools have gone off the rails. They are so lost that most of the people I talk, and I read a book called The Marxification of Education by James Lindsay, and he talks about Paul Freire.
He was just at my conference.
So you know what I'm talking about. And he was very much about how Freire's whole purpose was to say, there is no teacher educating the student. We're kind of equal. We're learning from each other, which kind of is weird that an adult would think that they have something to learn from the 14-year-old or 15. That seems very groomerish, very, I don't even know if it's not dehumanizing, but almost de-intellectualizing the adult who should have the experience. Your job is to teach. It's an
inversion of the natural order.
It is, and it's destroying the whole point of you being educated to pass on the information to those who are still starting. They have to have a place to go to learn the next, what we used to do in the old days in the tents and in the huts, where the elders would tell the stories of their history, so you knew who, that's what education is. What's our story? Who are we? How do we get here? What does it mean to be human? What is all this? And so it becomes more precise as we get more locked in to our philosophy. So let me ask you this, though. Postmodernism sort of went backwards, took us backwards from enlightenment and trying to grow and learn and then say, okay, this is true now. This is never going to change, so we can build from this. So let's figure this out then. So somewhere down the road, this aerialist and an actress and somebody, and this is no way demeaning. I'm in the performance art. I was a magician before I was a comedian.
I actually, there's a video, you can probably still find it, where I was like a magician's assistant.
Oh, nice.
He did a whole series. Yeah.
Perfect, because they needed women that like box jumper, like you were in the
Yeah.
illusions. Yeah. So you got to be small. You got to
Right.
be very flexible.
Yep.
And you have to be able because of the way that the illusions are created. So, anyways, interesting that you'd say that. But my point is this: it's not to demean that; it's to actually enhance the fact that it's irrelevant how people perceive the exterior of somebody. It's the internal that makes us. It's our mind that makes us who we are. So, tell me about this journey from someone who was a performance artist, gymnast, so athletic, wanted to be an American Ninja Warrior, so that's pure athleticism. Maybe that you thought that could be a livelihood. You could teach it to others, or you could make money winning it, and maybe you could go on tour, go and do it at TED Talk. I don't know what your motive was, but something changed in you that changed you forever.
Yes.
What happened?
So during 2020, I was doing aerial performances, but I was also doing motivational speeches. So I have kind of a unique birth story. And so I was talking about movement as a metaphor for life and using physical training as a teacher to help you overcome adversity in other areas of life, because I felt that that was very instrumental in my overcoming my challenges.
Should we mention that?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't.
So I was born with a series of challenges. My mom was sick during first trimester of pregnancy. The diagnosis is congenital rubella. That's what they had stated. But the complications were I was born blind in one eye. I actually had cataract surgery when I was about 3 months old. It was very different than it is today. Today's pretty much a routine procedure. My mom has actually had one recently. No big deal. But they pulled the iris. They left debris behind my retina. They had to go back and do what's called a retinal cleanup. A few months later, they found rubella pigment, or they found pigmentation, I should say, behind my sighted eye. And that was when they made that diagnosis. But I am blind in one eye. I am bilaterally hearing impaired. We didn't know that. I didn't get hearing aids until I was almost 6 years old. I learned how to speak by reading lips. And I was
What does
born
bilaterally mean?
both ears.
Okay.
So people always ask this. They're always like, so which ear is the good ear?
Okay.
And I'm like, if you look at the hearing chart, it's like a X. So essentially, one ear has more high frequency, one ear has more low frequency.
So you need them both. It is good that you.
But the loss is the same in both ears. It's just the different frequency loss. But it's a pretty significant hearing loss. And as a child, I actually had a patch over my sighted eye because I had a little bit of vision left in my weaker eye. And so I was essentially blind and deaf every other day of my childhood. I had heart surgery when I was about a year old. I was born with hypotonic limbs. So
Holy smoke!
the limbs didn't develop, the muscles in my limbs, and I had fine graphic motor impairment, stunted
Courtney,
growth.
quit it!
Sorry, yeah.
Stop it!
They told my mom the best she could hope was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. Fortunately, they were wrong. My parents actually sued for my birth. It was called the wrongful birth case.
Oh.
So, yeah, so I, when I was doing the speeches, I did the aerial mostly. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was really supposed to be a testament to people to show what was possible when nobody thought it was, that we can overcome great odds.
Did they try to encourage her to abort you?
My mom had a titer testing done, and the doctor was dyslexic. He read it as 112. If he had read it as 121, my mom would have had an abortion, and that's why they sued for my birth, because the argument was the alternative was abortion.
He was dyslexic and misread the chart.
Yes.
How did he get through medical school?
I don't know, and I don't think that to me is really not. I mean, I'm actually grateful for his mistake.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
But
just odd that he must
I
be
think-
making a lot of mistakes then throughout his career.
I think that the dyslexia is not so much of an issue as the fact that the hospital or the greater practice didn't have somebody overseeing it.
Yeah.
If you know that you have a challenge like that, then the responsible thing to do would be to have someone double check your work.
Was this in the 70s?
It was.
Okay, I was guessing.
Yeah. So, so that was my birth story. And so I was giving speeches really to try and show people the miracle of life, and that we can use something so tangible. I mean, everybody can move, even paralyzed people can move their eyes. Like we are designed to move. I believe all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expressions. And so I wanted to inspire people to use that philosophically as a teacher to help them overcome adversity, because we're all going to be met with challenges in life. None of us escape that. None of us are, impervious to
Mhm.
challenges and struggles, but we can learn how to handle them
Mhm.
and surmount, a
Mhm.
great deal of them. And so that's what I was doing. And
Or make money being a victim.
right, exactly.
You
So
can choose
I
that
was,
path too.
yeah, I was trying to encourage people not to take
Be
victim
victim. That's
mentality,
right.
and to appreciate the blessings of life.
Mm.
And so I was doing that, but I was also coaching CrossFit, and personal training on the side. I had kind of left the acting, producing industry for other reasons. I had gotten totally scammed. I felt I
Were
needed
you
a
ever
little.
in any films though? Did you
I
ever
was.
get any
I
work?
was in several films. I had
Anything
a
we
theater
know so we
company.
could go find you? There she is.
Yeah.
There's Courtney.
I probably had like smaller roles in bigger films that you can go look up my
Okay.
IMDb page. But I was never like a lead in a big
Okay.
blockbuster or anything like
Oh.
that. I had a theater company when I lived in New York. I did a lot of theater. I ended up producing theater. But yeah, so I was coaching. I was doing these aerial speaking events, and then all of that got canceled. Obviously, during 2020, I was actually supposed to do a pole competition 2 days after the lockdown started, and yeah, I was very
Pole?
pole.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna do a pole competition, and
Is that like where they do, like it's on a pole, like a
yes.
fireman's
And so
pole, and
now
they
people have an impression of
well,
pole.
I didn't want to
Yes,
say
I
stripper
know
pole,
people do have
but
it, but I will
that's
just
all.
tell you this. So there's pole sport, and then there's pole dance.
Yeah. Okay.
This was really a gymnastics routine with vertical bars instead of horizontal.
Okay.
I can, bring up the routine and see people see this was a gymnastics.
Oh, not
routine.
just one pole.
It was two poles.
I see.
One was spinning and the
Okay.
other one was static.
Interesting.
I had worked really hard on this routine.
Yeah.
And it was harder than any bar routine I did as a gymnast competing.
Really?
Yes, way harder.
Wow.
I had like dragon flags in it. I had like,
Oh, because you
yeah.
added all these other bells and whistles.
I mean, it was just in terms of it wasn't as much momentum, but a lot of physical strength.
Okay.
And on top of it, you had to be in sync with the music, so it was a performance, as you said. Like it has to look fluid, it has to look graceful. You're doing these very hard,
Yeah.
physically demanding moves. So, but anyway, that was canceled. So everything came to a standstill. I got fired from the two gyms I was working at. I can't prove it, but I'm 99.9 repeating sure that it was for political reasons.
What do you
And,
mean, though, political reasons? So you
so-
weren't political up to this point.
I wasn't, but then COVID hit, and
What would
everything-
you have considered yourself politically prior to this?
I would have considered myself like an establishment normie Republican.
Oh, so you were still Republican.
Yeah,
so,
and I had been pretty active, maybe around like 2000 in like early 2010 to 2012. I was pretty active. I had joined FOA. You might be familiar with it, Friends of Abe. It was like the underground, secret Hollywood conservative group.
that everybody knew about.
That was on the front page of the New York Times.
Exactly.
Yeah, as my friend Jeremy likes to say, it was so secret that it was on the front page of the
Right.
New York Times. But yeah, I was a member of that, so, and I have been pretty involved, but then I just found that it was very hard, not just to get work, but it was very hard. I actually wrote for Politichicks. My ex
okay.
was a political pundit. So I was pretty out there, and I found it was so hard, not just to get work, but to even make friends. And so I kind of went a little bit underground politically for a pretty long time. That's when I went into the fitness industry. And but then 2020 hit, and that was a big. So it started with the BLM stuff, and I did not put a black square for Blackout Tuesday, and I was approached by another coach that they were very disappointed in me, disappointed that I was not using my platform responsibly. I didn't even really see myself as having a platform, so I didn't really understand what that meant. At that time, I think my quote unquote platform comprised of my Instagram that had been like a training diary since I started Ninja Warrior, just to track my progress. Mostly for me, it was like a training journal, and then maybe I had some Facebook friends from childhood that I would keep in touch with here and there. I never saw it as like, it wasn't a platform at that time. And so I was very confused, but she was very upset. And I remember she told me, we can't just be white feminists. We have to be allies. And my reaction
Pure
was,
Marxism.
I'm not a feminist, so I don't know where this, but all this to say that was kind of the beginning of a lot of turmoil, a lot of conflict that I had really intentionally tried to avoid for quite some time. And I had started just posting when I got fired. So I got fired pretty shortly. So that happened. We had this altercation. And then maybe 2 weeks later, the gym had, they had taken kind of a break and then they'd opened. And I had said something to one of the owners. Now, these owners were Navy SEALs. I knew they weren't politically aligned. I mean, they were not Republicans, which is what I identified at the time. But
See, it's funny because you always think of a Navy SEAL as
You would
being
think so.
super conservative. You just assume that they're pro-America, pro-God, pro-country.
right.
It feels like that's normally who joins that type of, especially of that level
Sure.
of commitment is so difficult. So, but they were
They
not.
were not, and I had known them quite some time, so I knew they were not aligned. I mean, one of them had made some comment. He was on Fox, not for political commentary. It was like like it was some sort of a fundraiser, and the Navy SEALs went out into the ocean, and he had like pulled Pete Hegseth and kind of like saved him from a wave. Yeah, and I happened to see it just because I was at my mom's and Fox was on, and he had asked me to come join him for a workout. So I mean, just friends, like we were just hanging out, and then he made some comment. I had said, by the way, I saw your segment. I was home, and he said, I think you're my only friend who like saw this. He's like, and I said, really? And, I mean, you were on Fox, and and he said, yeah. He's like, I don't have any friends who would watch that. And I said, it was a 2-minute segment just to watch their friend. And it wasn't political at all. I mean, it was a fundraiser that the Navy SEALs were involved in. It was not political. But anyway, just so I knew where he stood. I mean, he wasn't a hardcore leftist, but he was definitely a left of center. And the other owner as well. And I had made some comment, just this is when, some of the lockdowns had started. And I made some comment about how I really just parroted Ben Franklin. I said, well, if you're willing to trade a little bit of security, a little bit of freedom for security, then you deserve neither. And they kind of snapped at me. They said, you don't understand this generation and, what the younger generation has had to deal with and how they've grown up, and kind of lost it on me. And then I was fired a week later. And I just kind of feel like I kind of put the sequence of events together. It seems like that would be the reason. And the other one was pretty blatant. They wanted me to wear a mask, and I'm hearing impaired. So this is actually how I started my podcast, is because I'm hearing impaired. And so when people were wearing the mask, I didn't realize how much I still depend on nonverbal cues for clarity of speech until all the coping mechanisms I spent my life developing were then stripped from me. So I found myself really isolated, very, very depressed. I mean, I would argue probably clinically depressed and very frustrated. And that Jim had asked me to wear a mask, and I said, I just can't do it. It's just, that's not going to happen. I said, I'm happy to do the 6 feet social distancing, whatever. I would.
But because the others would be wearing it, it wouldn't make a difference for you to see their lips. So was it more about you felt constrained to your own freedoms, or I don't want to make them believe that I
couldn't wear the mask because it was causing chalazions in my good eye.
Okay, so there's legitimate medical
and
reason.
I wrote articles on this. There's actually a doctor in New York who found the correlation between them, and her practice there was a huge uptick of chalazion. And I'm blind in one eye. I wasn't going to take that kind of a risk. But it also, the mask further prohibits my peripheral vision. So if you imagine somebody who sees binocularly has this range of periphery, and then I'm monocular, so I have about 60% of the periphery that somebody who sees binocularly would. And so when I wear a mask, you have the reflection. It further impedes my vision. And I don't feel comfortable being in an environment where people are very close quarters, doing very difficult movements, throwing heavy weights around when I can't see to the when I'm further reducing my senses. So I didn't feel comfortable with that at all. The aerial studios, actually, they required me to wear a mask too. And the teachers were wearing a mask. Everybody was wearing a mask. And I was like, I'm not going to climb 26 feet in the air and invert when I'm already challenged, and now I really have no clue what people are saying, and my
And they had
perception's
no
further reduced.
sympathy for the medical
No.
results. That I mean, you weren't like just going in and said, "I just don't believe this is my First Amendment." You weren't doing that.
No.
You're saying, "Listen, this physically makes my life miserable and
Yes.
and potentially dangerous,
Yes.
frankly. So can I get a medical pass here, please?" And they said, "No, no, thank you.
Yeah.
No, we just
We're
want
not.
you to be, you know." And that's my point, though. That's totalitarianism. But
Yeah.
more important, not more important, because it could be more important than that, as far as controlling. But I think that maybe this leads us to. Now, I don't want to get off of where you found your big, even though I think we're getting the gist of that. You started going, something's awry here in the way that the world.
I started the podcast mostly because somebody had suggested. I started posting a lot on social media, and mostly posting journals, medical journals. My point that I kept.
So you're
trying to make-
defending your physical
and I kept
distress
Mhm.
in hopes that maybe I can educate people in this one little tiny thing that I've learned about me.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about an array of things, but one of the things I really was trying to get people to understand is that the masks were not just unhelpful, but they were actually deleterious to one's health. And
In general, not just yours, though.
not
You're
just
thinking
mine.
there's a much
No,
broader.
I had so many articles substantiating my claim. And but then I started posting all sorts of things. I mean, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands, so I started reading. I actually, the first day of the lockdown, I had decided I was going to write, and then after 10 hours, I had a beautiful white screen staring back at me, and I realized that maybe this wasn't the time. It wasn't quite going to work out. So I ordered 11 books that day, and I really went back to kind of my academic roots were philosophy, psychology.
Really?
Yeah. In high school, I had written 285-page theses on dream analysis. My school published it.
Wow.
So
you're a bit of an intellectual, anyways, as far as the way your mind works. That you like to break things down, you like to think them through. Are you autodidact?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so. I did an independent study in philosophy in high school. I tend to learn best kind of doing my own research, and yeah. So
that's me. That's my whole life has been through personal learning and contemplation and so forth. But I mean, you got to find the way that works for you. And going back to the schools, this sort of one size fits all way of teaching simply does not work for a lot of people. Some guys like us who you already had your challenges physically, but now at my age and this far down the road, I know about ADHD and obsessive compulsive behavior and these things that I didn't know anything about when I started. I was just a hyperactive, and I just couldn't sit still, and I just was a problem.
Right.
But guess what? I didn't get 5 ants. I didn't get any. It's kind of like, figure it out, buddy, because there ain't going to be a drug for you.
That was much better.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
But you don't know that you're damaged. You don't know that you have a mental disorder, and it is. It's a mental disorder. It doesn't mean that you can't function or be very successful.
I don't really think, I think so much of what is labeled as ADD is actually because they have militarized school systems, and the purpose of the militarization, this is actually an exportation of the Prussian model of education. And the Prussian model of education was born out of the Battle of Jena. This was in 1807. They lost the Battle of Jena. They realized they lost because the soldiers rebelled. And they said, okay, well, we can't have that anymore. So what we need to do is eradicate critical thinking. And of their own words, this is a translation, but they said that they wanted to breed mindless, obedient soldiers. And this is really why you see things like the bell ringing, and it's very like the class switches at that time. You're sitting in a chair, everything's very structured. And I think really ADD is a result of children are not designed, and especially young boys, are not designed to operate that way. That's not how they learn. Very few. There are some linear thinkers who are very, obedient, compliant. And, again, there's always exceptions to every rule. But the majority are not. And they learn best in an immersive environment when they can be engaged in something. And I think what happens is now they become difficult because they're trying to force, these square pegs into a round hole, and why aren't these square pegs fitting? They must be the problem children. They have ADD.
Yeah. Well, but I agree with you. I don't want anybody to sort of tamp down the clearly the creativeness
Sure.
of those of us who have this particular thing that go on and do amazing artistic things because we have this double-edged sword.
Sure.
What I guess I'm referencing is that there are some actual byproducts to ADHD in your biology and in the way you engage life that can be challenging. You know when TV's on over here and I'm talking to you, I can't. This is how I am. I can't. You know, my wife helped me understand it best. She was like, he can't unhear it. Once I hear something, my mind can't unlock this thing. Well, I just thought something's wrong with me, but some people can have the TV, the radio, have the phone, it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I can't. And so what I'm getting at is there is a detriment to that in that stimulus makes it impossible for me to focus.
Yeah.
So that is what I mean. I can't just magically make that go away by trying harder.
No, sure.
See what I mean?
I don't see it as a detriment. I just think that there's different learning styles for different people.
All right.
You know, so to try and force somebody to learn in a way that is not conducive.
No. I'm all with you on
Yeah.
that. I guess what I'm trying to say is though
I'm
that
not
is,
saying that
I don't want to
doesn't
pretend
create-
like that it's simply a matter of we think differently.
Yeah.
That there is some challenge, just like
Yeah.
with you. Just to say, well, I only have one eye doesn't mean you can't see,
Right.
and doesn't mean you can't do greater things than many people
Sure.
can see. But it's a detriment. It
Sure.
does
Oh,
have
yeah,
its
for sure.
downside to
Yeah,
it, right?
for sure.
And so anyways, here you go. You started talking about how your life was affected, and but I want to ask you this before we go a little bit further because I think to really have good positive dialogues, it's also good to understand sort of the philosophy of the person, so we understand that we're talking the same language. Because
Right.
sometimes that is what happens is we use same words, but we interpret them differently. We don't know. We don't get along with each other. It's because we see the world presuppositionally different. And so we talked a little bit on the phone, and I mentioned this. This is not a gotcha. It's just it helps people understand who's watching my show. You're not a Christian. I am. But you also said, but I have a lot of respect for the Judeo-Christian morality and ethic historically and what it created through the world. Did you ever read Tom Holland's book, Dominion?
No.
Well, he's an atheist, but
Okay.
he wrote this entire thesis. It's a big, giant book about how everything that we see as normal for freedom, civil rights, women's rights, children's rights, human rights, justice, mercy, forgiveness, everything that we see as just the way humans would naturally behave is Christian. It's not. It's something that was taught by this belief system that became so much part of the culture and the DNA of the culture that we now think it's how we think. We think it's how we feel. You're swimming in this ocean and you don't know you're wet because that's all you know is this is how people think. So, but you also mentioned, I'm not trying to make it awkward, but like you way back in the beginning, you said, yeah, they wanted me to, be topless. And it's like, I don't think so. So that's a moral claim though. That's a moral standard. That's a virtue standard, a modesty standard. And so your mother, you said, was like, hey, I don't know if I even am comfortable with this. So she must have had a standard that she raised you with. Was your father there as well? You had a dad? Okay. So what was,
I would say probably my father more so than my mom in that regard.
But so what did you guys have in, so were they religious at all?
No, so my family is Jewish.
Oh, you're Jewish.
They're
There
Jewish.
we go.
Yeah, my entire family is Jewish. I was not raised with much religion. My dad was actually
Which is virtually the most common Jewish trait.
I know.
And
I think
I don't understand.
I honestly think it's a result of all the persecution.
Okay.
And so many Jews just hid. And so they abandoned religion because they wanted to assimilate. And it was safer. It was safer. I mean, my great-grandmother watched her father be sliced in half by the pogroms at 7 years old. And then she pretended to be her parents' Christian neighbor's daughter in order to come to this country. And she was 7. So I don't think people, and I'm not, undermining the fact that other people and cultures and religions have had persecution, of course, and I think all persecution is evil, literally.
Of course.
I would actually use that word. I think it's inhumane. And of course, it creates all sorts of intergenerational trauma. But I think the Jews have had so much of it, and it has been kind of passed down and inculcated into their way of being that it is safer not to wear that banner.
Well, I did a documentary, I don't know, maybe 10 years now ago, called Boycott This, and it was, an entire premise was defending Israel against the BDS movement. You're familiar with BDS?
Yeah.
Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction. It's how they ended apartheid in South Africa, was this idea. And so then we have all these Middle Eastern countries that basically are trying to utilize that against Israel, like you guys are colonialists and your apartheid. They say it's apartheid in Israel. So anyways, Laura Cardozo-Moore, I don't know if you know her, but she Proclaiming Justice to the Nations is her group. And so she's a Christian, but it's all about partnership with Jews and protecting and defending Judaism and Jews and Israel's right to exist. So we did this entire documentary. I went to Israel a couple times, interviewed a bunch of people, and there's a couple things I got from that research and development, as well as just my own. I was raised, and this is probably not to you, but to a lot of Jews, this is a little surprising, because I was raised as a Christian that you defend Israel, that you defend them because Christianity came from Jews.
It did.
It's
Jesus
like,
was a Jew.
well done. Well, bravo.
Yeah.
But it's also part of the Torah. It's part of your lineage. There is going to be a Messiah. There is going to be a completion of God's monotheistic revelation to this group of people that He set aside, so that their genealogy could be recorded, so we could prove their this race,
Yeah, the Christians
ethnicity.
get actually grafted in.
They get grafted in and become Jewish, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that is funny, because people said, "Do you ever have any regrets in life?" And I go, "I only have two. One, I wish I was left-handed,
I'm left-handed.
because they're so cool. And two, I wish I was Jewish.
You wish you were?
Jewish.
Interesting.
And here's why. I think it's impossible, if you study the history of Jews,
Right.
to not believe in God.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't exist. You
No,
are
it's
the
true.
most historically documented, persecuted people
I
group
would
in
agree.
human history. And there's only like 14 million of you in the whole wide world
I know.
anyways. It's like people think Jews are everywhere because they're so accomplished,
Right.
but you're not.
Oh,
You're
no.
you're less than, it's a very small group of people with about 120 Nobel Prizes from Israel, size of New Jersey.
Yeah.
And
I grew up in New Jersey. Yeah.
so something about Jews is impossible to deny. There's something about this, you guys, that God has put His hand on you. I know you don't believe in Him, I guess, but I'm telling you, it's amazing to see what you've accomplished. I remember speaking to a rabbi. He said, we learned that at any moment, we could be 100 years in a village, everybody's peachy keen, and suddenly they've decided Jews got to go. We're destroyed everything. And we didn't have time to pack all of our books and pack all of our stuff. We had to put it in here. We had to learn how to think and reason and remember and study and take, because we can take that to the next place.
Right.
And then I can become the banker, and I can become the doctor, and I can. So there's something about that history of survival
Yes.
that has
That's true.
caused you to be so successful.
I think that's true.
So are you proud to be Jewish? Or do you don't care?
I mean, I don't think, no, definitely. I don't think that, I think everybody should be proud of their ancestors. I mean, the sheer fact that we're here means we're survivors. Our ancestors survived and procreated and produced us. So
well, so why the okay, I guess you
Yeah.
answered that. I was kind of, why is the disconnect from the religious element of Judaism and
my father, he was actually the only one in my immediate family who was bar mitzvahed, and he at the time he had already decided he was an atheist. And he said to his parents that he would be willing, he made a deal with them that if they gave him,
I'm going to make some money.
yeah, he said, if you give me season tickets to the Brooklyn Dodgers,
Oh, nice.
then I'll do a bar mitzvah. And my dad was very, very, yeah, there you go. My dad was very, very bright. He was like literally off the IQ chart.
Okay.
We know he was tested, like he was actually off the chart. So to study the Hebrew and learn and do, what he needed for the
So he was easy to pull that off just to get through
like
the
that's the
thing.
deal. We'll do that. But he said, that I don't believe in this. That's and I don't know. He had made that decision pretty early on, but he was always very supportive of religion. He felt that for most people, they needed religion in order to have a moral code of ethics.
See, now that's a very enlightened point of view because it's so true. And a leftist would have no idea how crucial that is and how impossible it is to have a moral code without God. It's impossible.
Well,
you can live by
this
morality,
right.
but it's not intrinsic in your belief system. It can't.
Well, I would argue. I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, so we can get back to this. But leftism, Marxism, really, to me, is actually it's not secular. I mean, they say the godless commies.
No. It's religion.
It's a religion.
It's a religion.
And it is really a Luciferian, a theosophical religion. So I would argue they do have a code of ethics. It's just an inversion of the biblical framework.
Usually, yes.
So that would be it's a very Gnostic kind of belief system. That would be my kind of umbrella.
Explain Gnostic for those who aren't.
So I personally differentiate between like capital G Gnosticism and lowercase Gnostic. When I say Gnostic, I'm incorporating the umbrella of a lot of the occult belief systems. So the Hermetic traditions, the alchemical, which are usually very much applied in Hermeticism.
Would the Kabbalah have anything to do with that?
Yes.
Do you see that
Kabbalah,
as a
mystified variation of Judaism?
Okay.
And I would
and
say
an aberration?
Yes, I
Okay.
would. And it's gone through many iterations. And I would say one of the most distinct perversions of the Kabbalah was the Lurianic Kabbalah. So this is, was it Jacob Luria? Yeah.
I don't know.
Isaiah Luria.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's Lurianic Kabbalah. And the biggest thing that it did was it changed the meaning of Tikkun Olam. And the initial meaning of Tikkun Olam was this idea of eradicating idolatry. So then when all the false idols, when people no longer worship them, then there would be a unity under the Messiah, and a covenant would be renewed. And to me, that's a beautiful premise, and I think that's something that the Christians would be aligned with. This is not really all that controversial, although they believe the Messiah has already come. That would be the one distinction. But this idea of unification under God is not a foreign concept. However, what shifted in that time was it made it more of a for the greater good, which has now been interpreted by a lot of the more reformed and more left-leaning Jewish institutions, and not just temples and synagogues, but actually just organizations. It's now been interpreted as social justice advocation. So
would you think, and I hope you don't feel like suddenly we got into the Jewish thing, because I'm very pro-Jewish people, as I said. But I mean, it does lead to some interesting observations. Why are they oftentimes not only secular, but so some of the worst ideas in human history came from Jewish people? And I hope it doesn't sound, I don't know, that I'm sucking up to it, but it makes me sad, because I have such respect for the Jewish people. And it's like, and yet when I see Freudian ideas, when I see Marxist ideas, when I see some of the crap that has come out of it, it's like, why do you guys not just decide I'm abandoning God?
right.
Which is kind of a classic story if you read the whole entire Old Testament. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of your game. We'll come back when everything goes bad. And then, are we back now? Can I get a new Baal? Can I put up a new obelisk? But it seems like oftentimes they've gone so far the other way, almost like as in a I don't know, as in a shaking a fist to God. Like I'm going to take this to the other level. Is there a cultural element to that? I'm not trying to ask you to represent all Jewish people, but I'm curious about it, because again, Dennis Prager, big fan of Dennis Prager. He's the one that really taught me about differentiating between liberals and leftists, and how important that is. How
they co-opt the language.
How desperately I long for liberals to come back. You know, I got to interview
true classical liberalism. of the variation of the Scottish common sense realism, which was very much the foundation for the United States founding fathers' founding documents. Yeah.
And they let us all have a point of view and let the
Mhm.
people decide, but everybody got a chance to be sit at the table of ideas, which
Yes.
left it and does not allow. Marx was that way, though. If you didn't agree with everything you said, he would just throw you out
Who?
as a Marx.
Yeah.
He would throw you out as a heretic, and I was like, you have to, he was dogmatic about everything. I think is
Yeah, it was
inside.
originally the Manifesto of Faith.
Yes. Anyways, I don't want to get off on that,
Well,
but
I will just say this. I mean, it is a long rabbit hole for people, and it's very hard for people to understand. But I do think part of the abandonment of the faith has been because of this persecution, and it was a means of one thing you hear from Jews all the time is how they wanted to assimilate.
yeah.
They just wanted to assimilate. They wanted to so that they weren't persecuted, and it was for safety, for survival.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But I also think that because they were so persecuted and yet they were survivors, so they were really great instruments. So like you talk about how some of the, like that rabbi who said how they had to remember everything and they had to education was something they valued because they had to figure out what trades they could do.
And
they
it's
were
the
gonna
only thing that
do-
you couldn't steal from me if you suddenly kicked me out on the curb. You couldn't take that from me. It's in here
Right.
forever. Yeah.
Exactly. So they, I think as a result, there has been a lot of value on things like education, like core familial, structure. And these things have helped them to survive and to succeed,
Mhm.
but they also make them really good assets. I mean, a lot of them tend to be really good wordsmiths, right?
Mhm.
So, and good bankers.
And comics,
And what?
comedians.
And comedians, exactly, right? They turn their pain into humor
Yeah, but-
and share that with the world. So I think, but what happens is these are all really good instruments for propaganda, for to be utilized by the people who need banking cartels. And so what has happened is they become scapegoats a lot of the time. So they become the frontmen of these various they will take the fall, they are the front, so they look like they're the evil doers, but they're not the ones pulling the puppet strings.
No.
And a really great book on this, I've interviewed him, my friend Richard Poe did a book called how the British created communism and blamed it all on the Jews. Now I think the title is
Really?
the title is a little bit misleading. I wouldn't say that the Brits created communism. That has a very long lineage. I would say it really goes all the way back to the Illuminists. It goes even further back. I mean,
But
you
see,
know,
we
the
have
ancient
we have
mystery,
to we
Egyptian
have
cult.
to we have to talk about everything you just said. We might as well jump into this because, well, no, because this is kind of I didn't want this is your expertise. It's what it's what you learned. It started with the mask and and trying to just communicate folks well, and then suddenly it's like I'm noticing that this is not a healthy way for people to live. And plus, just to let you know, from my personal perspective, I need to see people. So it hurts me, and it doesn't allow me to participate in society and equally. And next thing you know, you start going deeper. Well, who are these people? And next thing you know, who's running the show?
Right?
And it's not it hasn't been us for a long time. No, but this is so important because I really want to dive into this, with the time we have left, because it is what I want people to understand, because it's your expertise, and it's important that we talk to the experts on the expertise, because you had to do the work, and some of this stuff is just really difficult to even disseminate what is true and what is not, which is the problem.
Yes.
We don't even know what's true. We don't know who to trust. We don't know what information on the internet we know is legit.
Right.
So how do I even research things when it's some propaganda guy set this up to throw me off course? And oftentimes people that are starting catching up and get into something and start getting into some truths and revealing that, they throw out little pieces of something that takes them a little off course that they also believe in to make them sound crazy. What am I talking about? Many of the people that postulate the ideas that you're bringing up also suddenly decide the Earth's flat.
Right.
Or we never landed on the moon.
Mm.
So
the moon landing is very
okay,
questionable.
but here's what I'm making. Maybe so. I don't.
Yeah.
I still think we did, but let's just pretend that might be up for grabs.
Right.
But if I'm trying to hear you and it's like, holy crap, you are really opening up my. Oh, by the way, we never landed on the moon. Oh, never
Yeah,
mind.
right.
See what I mean? What a
Yeah.
great way to leverage discounting everything
Sure.
because of this one little crazy monkey wrench we're going to throw in
Right,
there just
sure.
because they're not going to stop.
Yeah.
So let's throw in a little pieces of let's throw in a bad apple into
Sure.
this and rot the whole thing. So let's get to that place.
Yeah.
What is going on this earth? Who are they?
Who are they? So I always make this joke. It's probably not funny anymore because they say it all the time, but I feel like the only game people learned how to play growing up is pin the tail on the donkey. They're just like, here, there's the boogeyman.
Yeah.
I found it. That's the answer. And I just think the human experience is way more complicated than that. I will preface just by saying that if you subscribe to a biblical worldview, probably the problem is probably Satan at the top. The ruler of the world, Earth here.
Mhm.
So I would say that if that's your worldview, that makes sense, and that
Well, what would your version be then if you consider that off limits from the spiritual dimension? Where else are you going to find your truth?
Right, I don't know that I consider that off limits.
Okay.
That's
a transcendental idea, though. It's outside of the material world.
Exactly.
So you have to believe in that, and that's
I
a
definitely
spiritual.
believe in
That's
that, yeah.
a whole different deal than the secular Jewish girl.
Oh, I'm not a secular, but I definitely would not say that. I just, because I didn't grow up with a strong biblical foundation, I'm not the kind of person who's going to make a claim that I'm all in on something that I don't have
Yeah.
the knowledge.
So you go to you are practicing Judaism?
So I would not say like that's just it. I'm not. I'm in.
I'm just curious, trying to
yeah.
understand who you are, to understand
right.
what gives you
So
the
I would have
foundation.
said I was pretty agnostic and very just not engaged prior to 2020. I think at 2020 I became very much, I would say, a deist. I don't know if I would use that term, has so many negative connotations these days. But in the sense that I believe that there is a divine creator.
Yeah.
I very much believe he created us in the image of him,
Good.
and that he endowed us with free will. And beyond that, I don't know that I know enough to make like very emphatic claims, and I'm just not somebody who will make claims about something I don't have a strong knowledge base.
I respect that. But I need to know.
Does it look like there might be a Satan,
when you
whether
start saying
figuratively
Satan,
or literally? Yeah,
and take it seriously,
Mhm.
and you're somewhat agnostic or deism, which would mean that God isn't intervening. A deist does believe in the higher being, but he has nothing to do with it. He rounded up and left. So I'm just saying, you're going deeper than maybe you even realize into refinding where it all started.
Negative connotations. I understand that, and I'm on whether or not he has a hand on every. I'm truthfully agnostic on that.
Okay.
I don't know.
You pray?
I do.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
deists wouldn't pray because he wouldn't be listening. He already did his job. He's gone. I think you're more religious than you realize. And that's good. I want you to be.
I also know that, in terms of to claim like what literal framework to partake, there's so many discrepancies, so many institutions have been captured. Throughout history, religion has been used as a tool for control.
What hasn't?
What? Right. I'm just saying. So it makes it hard for me to say like this is the box I check and I fall into. That's where
what have you
struggle.
landed on? You have to believe something. There has to be something that ain't going to move.
I just told you what I believe. I do believe that there is a divine creator.
But I mean, let's go beyond that. I mean, so let's move into this conspiracy theory stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That everybody is. See what I'm
we'll
saying? There's somewhere you had to believe
it's
was
a
true.
very intricate web.
Okay.
So it's a very intricate web. So I did not coin this term. I wish I did. I think it's genius, and I think it's very accurate. But my friend Matthew Crawford calls it the MOBS, and it stands for Military Occult Banking Syndicate. And I think that is very accurately describing what it is we're up against. So what we have is this intricate web of, you've got these, yes, you've got the banking cartels, you've got the 3 city-states, right? So the Vatican, the City of London, and DC are kind of like a conglomerate operation. And they work in conjunction with a very extensive military apparatus that does most things covertly, in secret. So there's a very there's something called the Five Eyes apparatus, which is a very elaborate military industrial intelligence apparatus. So they do a lot of espionage. They do a lot of.
But is it one military group, or is it literally throughout the
Five
world
Eyes
that have
Five
combined?
Eyes is thought to be the United States, Great Britain. Who was the other one? Australia, I believe. No,
Not Germany, not Italy.
I'm blanking. I have to look up which the five, but I would say it's actually six because I think Mossad is in there.
But this would have to be somewhat recent because the United States is only 250 years old. So how did they get in the game when they were nobodies? And
let me just look up I can't
yeah.
believe I blanked on that. Okay, it is Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, and obviously the United States.
So
But
all
I would add
Western
Israel. I would
countries.
yes, it's all Western. So yes, it is fairly new, but if you were to ask, I mean, it's a very complicated web because then we've got think tanks, these shadow think tanks. We've got, I would argue, there's actually literal mafias that work with the military industrial complex. Then we have the secret society apparatus, and I think that the secret society apparatus are very connected to the ancient dynastic families. And
Who are they?
I mean, there are a bunch of them, but a lot of like the Medicis, the
Rothschilds?
I would say they're kind of more mid-level. I actually think there's above them. Yeah, I think there's I would say some people think they are the Bowers, but I would actually say the Bowers are above them. Yeah, there's all these different secret society apparatus like the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Garter, and they
Freemasons?
I think the Freemasons have a big hand, and I think that the Freemasons actually go way back to ancient Egypt. And there's a lot of evidence to indicate that, whether they called themselves that at the time or not. These groups they go underground and they morph and then they rebrand. But what's consistent with all of this is a shared worldview, and I would argue it is a very Gnostic, theosophical. I think you could go as far as to say Luciferian.
So let's explain Luciferianism then. What would that be? If that's the base, what is it?
So I think a great way to make this really tangible for people, so they know, a lot of the claim I get is I'm spewing just nonsense, and I want people to know that there is documentation for everything that I say. If I'm speculating, I will let you know. I don't know. This is just my assessment or my speculation. But a really great source for this would be, I think, a lot of the theosophical writing. So the UN, I would argue, is very much a theosophical religious organization. And the evidence for that is in Lucius Trust, which was originally called Lucifer Publishing. This was founded in 1922 by Alice Bailey, who she was a co-Freemason. It's very interesting that Masonry is typically for men. However, there were some very prominent co-Freemasons who were female, and those happened to all be Theosophists. It was Annie Besant. It was Madame Blavatsky.
Well, we didn't even define Theosophist, so go ahead and explain that.
So Theosophists, the way they explain it is like a perennial philosophy. They say Madame Blavatsky herself, who founded the Theosophical Society in 1875, along with Henry Alcott and Quan Judge, and there were several others, but these are the more notable names. But she had claimed that it was not a religion, that it's just, a philosophy, a way of thinking. However, she herself says that it's diametrically opposed to Christianity and traditional Judaism.
Has to be, because that's the truth.
they are diametrically opposed. She does say that she welcomes Kabbalah Jews, but not traditional Judaism.
So mystery religions and mysticism is what makes sense.
She says that. She says it's very largely predicated on the ancient mystery religions, that it incorporates a lot of Eastern mysticism. Though
and Egyptian
that's the ancient mystery cults, yes. And Neoplatonism, which is predicated again on ancient Egyptian religions, mystery religions. And she says she draws a lot from some of the Eastern religions. And I just want to preface this. This is not to say that all Eastern religions are somehow bad or inherently evil. What they do, the way she describes it is it makes kind of like this soup where everything is blended, and the purpose is to obliterate any kind of boundaries or distinctions. And so they cherry pick.
Universalism in a way.
It is,
Yeah.
it is, but really what it is, out of many into one. Her belief system, and this is a very reductionist. I'm oversimplifying for the purposes of,
Yeah.
clarity.
Clarity.
Clarity. Yeah, I'm making it, succinct. But she says that the purpose of the human experience is to return to source, that we were all created from the one. And this does go back to the ancient mystery religions, the Neoplatonists very much share this.
And who would
worldview.
she think the one was? Does she ever define it?
Well, she does talk about Lucifer as being the true God. She sometimes uses the word Satan and says he's the true God and the light bearer. So the Gnostic view, to get back to that, is this an idea of being imprisoned, that somehow, we were, the earth was created by a malevolent God who trapped us by withholding knowledge from us, so we are limited, and that it was, they call it the demiurge, and that it was Lucifer who came to be the light bearer and could free us by providing us with the ability to access gnosis. And gnosis is this idea of, the divine wisdom. And the word theosophy actually means divine wisdom. So they believe that through theurgy, which is the divine work, that they can achieve that divine spark and essentially become gods. And that's the inversion. And I would argue that that's the inversion of Luciferianism.
It's literally Satan's fall.
Yes.
Is I will be God. It's the.
Yes.
I believe atheism is like one of the oldest religious cults in history.
I really see atheism in many ways as a decoy. I think that in many ways, the atheist was to be the boogeyman, to pin everything on the atheist. But really, who are the ones who are causing all the muckers? It's really it's the the Gnostics, the Satanists.
But what I'm getting at is that to be an atheist is to essentially replicate Satan's original flaw, which is to be created and to say, I don't need you, I'm God. And that's kind of what an atheist is saying.
I would say that the theosophical, or the Luciferians, the people in the occult type of religions, and the dark occult. I mean, the word occult just means like hidden.
Yeah.
But I would say like the dark occult religious practices, I would say that they believe they are gods and therefore they don't need. Atheists, I think, they're a little bit, it's a little different. I think so much has been pinned on them when really most atheists I know do not, I mean, my father included. I'm not saying I agree with it.
No.
You can disagree with the perspective, but most atheists I know do not think they are God.
No, they don't think it, but I think it's a subconscious landing place, because I see two things, at least with the new atheism. I see two pillars that seem to be very consistent: arrogance and anger. There's something now. Maybe this is just a result of social media, where it's easy to just sort of attack people anonymously and not get punched in the face, right? But there's a lot of anger, which makes sense, because I believe most people become atheists because of pain. God wasn't there. Please heal my mom. She's got cancer. She dies. Okay, screw you, God. That's and that makes sense. That's the hardest part of Christianity by far, is pain. It's like, wait a minute, why aren't you fixing this? Why aren't you intervening here? And it's a difficult thing, and I think we need to be, as believers, Christian believers, and that we need to be very open and honest about the challenges of faith. God is mysterious too. And it's not, I don't think it's because he's toying with us. It's like, if you knew everything, could do anything, and was everywhere simultaneously, you're a being that is incomprehensible.
Well, you also wouldn't really have free will, right?
Who wouldn't?
Humans.
Oh.
If you knew if you were on
Right. Oh, yeah. But you'd be God then. If you were. No, what I'm getting at is that for that being to exist, and we know that we clearly don't know everything, let alone most anything. Just by the nature of his being, he would be there would be parts of him that we just can't get. Even if we wanted to, it'd be like me taking Einstein's theses to a 1-year-old, everything I'm saying is true
Right.
and it's accurate. You can't grasp this.
Right,
You
sure.
just don't have the ability, and it's not because you don't mean well. You're just not ready to go there. That's all I'm getting at, is that I just think that atheism is a rather arrogant belief system. And here's why. Because throughout human history, by far, people have always believed in God of some kind. They've always said something is bigger than us. Something's out there, even if it was mythological, polytheistic, monotheistic, is what Jews gave us. And look who came out of that. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So, talk about making an impact with one guy, Abraham, going, what do you want me to do?
Right.
But that's your lineage, and again, something that I would want to be proud of. So, okay, so you went from, hey, can I not wear the mask?
Yeah.
To Gnostic Luciferians are taking over the world. So tell me about, quickly, maybe, and it's not because I'm trying to rush you. I guess you can take time if you want to. You want to hang around. But so let's go with the challenge of the day, in that we are, those of us who are seeking knowledge and trying to understand, so we can make informed decisions. And now we don't know what is information and what is propaganda. We don't know.
Right.
I don't know how you do it anymore,
Right.
because it's so devious. I mean, what can be more evil than to withhold my access to reality so we can have an actual conversation? That's why God said, don't lie,
Right.
because you're withholding reality.
Yeah.
And so we can't communicate with equal dignity.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, so of the conspiracy theories that run rampant on the internet. By the way, my wife is one of those that's gone deep. I was hoping she'd sit in and listen to you, because I thought, you very much speak of things that she has kind of said, have you heard of this? But can you kind of summarize, what are the most well-known, vibrant conspiracy theories that we hear a lot that you think are true, that these are actually, they're so fearful of this because they've actually exposed the truth? Can you think of some that kind of stand out as you need to know this?
Oh, I don't know. There's so many.
Well, just give me some that you think have Pizzagate. I was going to say Epstein Island, but that's not a conspiracy theory. That's true. I'm trying to think of some things that have sort of these monikers that were easily discarded, and we kind of have to revisit, going, holy smoke. Are they really killing children and taking, adrenochrome from them? And because if that's happening, how much more evil is it going to get on this earth?
Right. So I don't know for sure. Like, that's not something I could say, like, I have X evidence and I can point you in this direction. Specifically Pizzagate, for instance.
I just brought that up as an easy
what
bumper
I will say
sticker.
is that there's definitely, Epstein, as you said, we know there are definitely trafficking rings. Human trafficking is a huge operation.
But does that correlate to some of this other long history, Luciferianism? In other words, does it have a piece of this puzzle?
I mean, I think a great example is like abortion, right? You had talked about abortion earlier, and if you look at I think it's the Church of Satan, but they actually have a statement where they say that they have a right to abortion because the religious reason, because it's their sacrifice. Yeah. And so they have come out very publicly saying we have a right to, our abortions because this is part of our religious rituals. And so I think that's a good example. So we know that these types of religious sacrifices occur, that there are, Satan worshipers, there's Wiccans, there's all sorts of occultic groups who do have these types of practices. We know about Bohemian Grove. We've seen the footage from it. We know it's a
John
real
Rich
thing.
was on my show, and he said he was asked many times to go there, and he was like, I ain't going anywhere near Bohemian Grove.
Well, I know people who've been, and there were, and I think this is kind of like how a lot of these groups work. You have initiations, and so there's the exoteric veneer, and then there's the esoteric practice and signaling.
But is it legit, like, evil thing?
I think some of them, they experienced it as like an intellectual forum with lecturers, and so they saw just the exoteric veneer. And I think that it's very important to have that, so that now it makes those of us who are familiar with the esoteric messaging that has leaked out and the signaling to the initiate, now we look crazy.
But
Because
what
you
would
have,
that be? What is the real truth of Bohemian Grove then?
well, we've seen that they were doing sacrifices, and well, yeah, you can
You have
go
to
watch the
ease
video.
into that though.
Yeah.
Like you go there for the first time thinking I'm
Well,
part
that's
of
what
this
I'm
elite
saying.
club, and
I
then
think
down the road they watch you. And go, I think he's ready to go deeper.
I
Are you
think
ready for
so.
the baby sacrifice? I mean, is that what you're telling me is going on?
I do think so. Like if you look at, I know people who are Masons, and they're wonderful people. And when you tell them that the Masons have been behind these kind of trauma-based mind control rituals, and I know because I've interviewed satanic ritual abuse survivors, and most of them were abused through satanic rituals done in Masonic lodges, people who are Masons. Yeah, so I've talked to them, and not everything somebody says or remembers is always going to be 100% accurate. But when you have a story repeated so many times, you feel like you have some sort of trust with that person, it's hard to dismiss everything they say. So, do I think that there is kind of a higher structure? Absolutely. But do I think that there are plenty of Masons who are good, decent people, and they think it's just like this fellowship man, and it's where they go meet their bros, and these are not blood drinking ritual
Right, and
sacrificing
I
people.
think that
But
that's
there's initiates, right? There's
okay.
initiates. So think about a fraternity or sorority. There's hazing, right? They do all these trauma bonding type exercises. So now you're kind of indebted, and you feel obliged and compelled to. And then they do these actual initiation rituals with you.
Yeah.
So now you're sworn to secrecy, and then you've moved up a level, and so now you feel a sense of clout, a sense of responsibility, a duty, and they have leverage over you because they probably during the hazing experience there's some sort of blackmail clout that they might have over you.
Is Skull and Bones, by the way, anything to do with Masons?
So I think there's a lot of evidence to indicate that Skull and Bones is tied to the Illuminati. And for this, I would encourage people to read Anthony Sutton. He never actually got to the work where he could really make that clear connection, but he does draw a lot of parallels and connect a lot of dots that do indicate that that's the case. And he himself says that more research needs to be done. However, if you think about, the Russell Trust, right? This is Alfonso Taft, who is related to President Taft, and I think it was Walter Ian Russell. He was actually related to the Duke of Marquis, the Duke of Bedford, who donated the building that became the Tavistock Clinic.
Where they're doing the gender affirming
Well,
surgery.
that later
or
became
were
Tavistock.
they just got rid of it?
Yeah,
but I
that
don't-
later that was through GERDS. But they later became Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and it was Tavistock Clinic at that time, and he donated that building specifically so that it could be the shell shock therapy research. But I think a lot of building for that, and I think a lot of that research in conjunction with Maudsley and Mapother Hospital really became the foundation and the codification of specific research that was needed in order to execute MK Ultra. There were a lot of overlap between the
And that
figures
was
as well.
LSD experimentation on people
That was a huge part of
unaware.
it. That was part of it. But yeah, that was definitely
Okay, so I mean, obviously, it's so deep and it's so interconnected, and so I guess kind of trying to summarize the best we can. Maybe we'll have to do a part two, but
I was
so
going to say Wilhelm Wundt. Actually, his grandfather was Karl Casimir Kirchenrat Wundt, and he was known as Raphael in the Illuminati. And he was largely he was a professor at Leipzig University. They call it the Leipzig connection, which is largely what Sutton predicated his research on. Both Sutton and Charlotte Iserbyt. Charlotte Iserbyt was one of the ones who blew the whistle about the school choice. She was a whistleblower under the Reagan administration on the BEST project, which is all this tech ed that's going on. But all this to say that her father and her grandfather were both members of Skull and Bones, so she actually had access to those little black books, the membership books, which they don't release anymore. But yeah, so Wilhelm Wundt was very instrumental in exporting this modern day education system and tying it to psychology. He was one of the first experimental psychologists. actually have a lab. And so, just interesting to note, his grandfather was actually Raphael in the Illuminati, the Utica Provincial Report.
And the Illuminati then is kind of a structured religious cult, satanic Luciferian cult, whose existence started when, and it was basically, are they the lever pullers in a way? Is that what you're kind of getting at? Is
Well, I think they're part of it. Like I said, I think it's a very intricate web. I don't think it's them, that, and of course they quote unquote went underground. They rebranded, but they did go underground formally. But what the historical documentation shows is that it was May 1st in 1776 that Adam Weishaupt, who goes by the name Spartacus in the Illuminati, they all had code names, and he officially formed the Illuminati. 1776, so just prior to our Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776, our meaning United States.
yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence. I think this is very much a war, spiritual battle, battle of ideology. And he talks about, he was a former professor at Ingolstadt, and he was a Jesuit, and he modeled the Illuminati, he says, largely after the Jesuit structure. And this is part of why they had the secrecy and the hierarchical structure, because he says that was very conducive to people feeling like they had a sense of clout, and they'd be much more likely to do things that they otherwise would not. So it was a covert, but also a very it was a network that infiltrated. And they infiltrated in the Masonry. There are two great books on this. There's Proof of the Conspiracy, which actually our President George Washington used to warn the American populace about the infiltration of the Illuminati. And then there was also a Code of the Illuminati, which Thomas Jefferson used to warn the public about the infiltration to the Masonry. And this group, the Illuminati, did get shut down, and they went underground. There were some splinter offshoots. There were the League of the Outlaws, which became the League of the Just, and Marx and Engels were forerunners of the League of the Just, and then it became the Communist League. So there's a lot of evidence to indicate that there was, a lot of people said that Marx plagiarized, that he really was not, an original thinker. But who was it, Dr. Ralph Emmanuel, I think, is it Epperson? I'll have to look it up, his name, but it is Emmanuel. But he wrote a book on and he shows you how the Clinton Roosevelt book, which is called The Science of Government Founded on Natural Law, that book, in conjunction with the original Illuminati Manifesto, are almost like word for word what the Communist Manifesto came to be.
And is all that leading to the WEF? Is that what we're dealing with? Is that what the WHO are? Is that what we're talking about? Is now where you just reach this place of sophistication?
The World Economic Forum was actually originally the European Management Symposium. It was a year later that it became the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab was recruited by Henry Kissinger at a CIA Harvard-funded program that Kissinger was leading. And it was Kissinger, Herman Kahn, who had groomed and recruited Klaus Schwab to be the front man, to be the figurehead of the world. At the time was the European Management Symposium, and then it later became the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum in 2019 officially partnered with the UN. So they're more of the operational arm of the UN, the United Nations. The United Nations, of course, in 1948. And this is the land, like in New York City, was donated by the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers were very instrumental in the Trilateral Commission. Our former President Carter was also, these are people who were trying to create what they called an internationalist economic world order, so they could achieve world domination. The rabbit hole goes deep, but also splinters.
But what we're finding is that whatever we think is new, whatever we think is kind of like, wow, we never saw this coming, this is odd, this is like the oldest, it's never stopped. This is just an old Babylonian Baal worship. Who knows? But I mean, but in a way that's amazing, because it's almost like a confirmation that God is real. And I'm not even saying this as like the suddenly proselyte. It's to say, but no, in some amazing way, it's saying, I've been telling you all this for a long time. This is how this is going to play out.
Right.
That there will always be this very specific group who have shaken their fist at me and have become the outliers, the mavericks, who have decided to take my power and my freedom and my creation I've given to you, and you've taken that agency and said, I'm going to be the controller. I'm going to create the new heavens and the new earth. I'm going to create the new gods. You will worship me. I will take over. And God has already told us this. He said, this has happened from the get-go. This is how it all began, because I gave even my own dominion access to rebel if they chose, to prove that I was going to give you the ability to choose a relationship with me or not. And those who rebel will pay a price. But in the meantime, they're going to take down as many people as they can. And here we sit, an aerialist and a comedian staring at each other going, can you believe we're here? And as a Christian, we get another book of Revelation that deeply says this kind of is all getting wrapped up, like this is how it's all. When Revelation said you're not going to be able to buy and sell without the mark of the beast, and it doesn't make any sense. How could you even do that? How about if I told you there'll become a time when your money is digital? And we could decide, oh, you thought like that? Oh, you voted like that? Guess what? You see your money? Yeah. It's gone. Oh, how much you want for that bread? Well, let me look for it. I noticed that you went to this rally yesterday. So yeah, you don't get bread. Now, who would have come up with that? And who could have even thought that was feasible? How could you keep me from bartering? How could this ever happen? Because I can make money.
I would argue just like
else.
the federalization of currency eradicated bartering, which is what we really should be doing. Because that's
because theoretically currency is bartering. It's putting a value of your labor into a coupon. So because if I don't want to buy your chickens, but I need a fence, I got to be able to trade with you, and we don't have the exact same things. Courtney Turner, what a pleasure to meet you, to talk to you, to get some insights and wisdom. So grateful to know there's a warrior like you fighting the good fight along with the rest of us who don't know what we're doing, but we're doing our best. Folks, remember, if somebody ever says you're politically incorrect, always thank them for the compliment. PC free is liberty. It's not even a phrase used much anymore. It's wokeism basically is PC on steroids, is from the Frankfurt School and the cultural Marxism that has left us sitting here wringing our hands and wondering what happened. But you're responsible for what you know. You're responsible for where you go. You're responsible for actually doing something. And like I said earlier, actually calling out the emperor and saying, you're naked, buddy, and you look like an idiot. So folks, don't read about it. Do it, be it, and put it to place. I'm just a comedian on Brad Stine Has Issues. But you know what? I'm a Christian first. I'm an American second. And it does matter. Liberty matters. Freedom matters. And you're all going to die. So why not go down swinging and stand for something and being men and women of virtue and character and actually telling a story that matters. Leave a legacy, folks. Just God's Comic Brad Stine with Courtney Turner, and I'm just doing all that I know to do. And what is that? You know, I'm just putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.